All right, welcome everybody to the June meeting of the Admin and Public Works Committee for the City of Wildwood. It is 5:29. We will start with our roll call.
Councilmember Preston. Councilmember Mabry.
Here.
Councilmember Nyan.
Here.
Councilmember Farmer.
Here.
Excuse me. Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember Bakker.
Present.
Councilmember Vanek.
Here.
Councilmember Albers.
I am here.
All right, that brings us to a quorum. So I don't have much of a welcome message really or anything here this evening. I did send out a memo just kind of welcoming all of our new members, just to kind of give you guys a general idea, at least for the last year or so, how we've been doing stuff. As many of you, this is kind of your first go here with city council work. From what I have seen, and some of our other members here that have been around for a little bit can probably attest to this, our committee does an awful lot pretty quickly in comparison to other places. So a lot of our stuff is contract based, Rick and the guys need to get stuff approved right away. And then we're also trying to solve some problems on the fly. So everything that we try to do in here, or at least I've tried to get us to do in the last year or so, is about keeping the motion going. So we want to have real good discussions, which we've had, but have them for the right reasons. Like we want to always be kind of moving forward with that stuff. So that's all I've got for our welcome. That brings us to the technical aspect of electing a chair and a vice chair. I guess we'll open the floor to anybody that wants to nominate anybody or be nominated, or however you guys want to do that. Mr. Marshall.
I'd like to nominate you, but you can't decline.
And I would too as well. I second that.
Okay, would anybody else care to nominate anybody else? All right, then I guess I am the nominee for the chair, made by Mr. Marshall and then seconded by Ms. Nyan. Since there are no other nominations, technically, I guess we can do this by a voice vote, I assume, right? So we'll do this by a voice vote. All those in favor of me as the chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And I will abstain because I feel weird voting for myself.
You really don't want to, do you?
That brings us to a vice chair. If anybody cares to make a motion for that, or if anybody's interested in doing it. Basically, for those of you that are new here, all that entails for the most part is if I happen to not be available, it's kind of like being the mayor pro tem, you take over the meeting. Lauren Edens, who is no longer on council, served last year as the chair. She did a good job when she took over for that one meeting I wasn't here for, so. It's pretty rare, but technically we need to have one. So if anybody cares to make any nominations, that would be super cool.
What's it pay?
It pays probably more than the chair does, but
It's way below minimum.
yeah, way below minimum for sure. Mr. Albers.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Marshall for that position.
All right, we've got a nomination for Mr. Marshall. Anybody care to second it?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Mabry. Any other nominations? All right, with that, all those in favor of Mr. Marshall to serve as our vice chair, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, Mr. Marshall, welcome to being vice chair. That takes us to the approval of minutes. And again, for those of you that are new, we had some clarification on this the last time. You are okay to vote for these if you feel like this seems right. If not, you are okay to abstain from them. I don't think it kills us one way or the other. Right?
Yeah, a quick note on that, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
Chair. It's just that the minutes reflect that you weren't at that meeting, you weren't serving it in that capacity, but Robert's rules does actually, you can abstain, but it calls for folks to vote yes or no. Doesn't mean you can abstain, but it typically says you should vote. It's the duty to vote.
Mr. Lee, I just thought of something. Chair, if I could.
Sure.
Does the vote, I mean, theoretically, there are 4 that would be abstaining, theoretically.
Mhm.
And there's one, Never.
Also probably because he wasn't here yet.
all right. So if a quorum of those attending is not reached, is then moot, or is it just a simple majority of those attending?
So it's a simple majority of those attending that night.
Yeah.
So it depends. So in this case, we have 7, so you'd need 4 to approve.
So all of those could abstain and it still wouldn't count as a no vote.
We have four.
Right, we have four, but as Tom said, basically it just says, according to the minutes, you were not here and you are in agreement for that. So, anybody cares to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I was at the meeting, I'll make that.
All right, Mr. Marshall makes the motion, Tracy seconds the motion. All those in favor, unless we have any discussion on the minutes, they look pretty good to me. All those in favor of the minutes from our May meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Oh,
Okay, any abstentions?
abstention.
All right, Mr. Mabry will abstain, so the motion carries. That brings us to public participation. There's no one in the room. I don't see anybody online. Is there anybody online, Brendan? Okay. Well, since there's no one here and there's no one online, unless any of us want to make some sort of a public decree, I think we can move on past that. Into our administration section, and that is the master plan questionnaire as a for information item. Mr. Lee, I assume that is you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a quick little note. We had this questionnaire created back in March of 2025. Right now, the Citizen Oversight Group for the Master Plan 2026 is meeting monthly to review each element within the city's 2016 update of the master plan. Something we've kind of found is successful in getting direct feedback. We've done this now at the Economic Development Committee for the Economic Development element, and we're planning to do so for the Parks and Planning Committee as well, is to provide the elements that are kind of overseen and implemented by the corresponding group. And in this case, admin PW, falling well within the purview would be the community services and the transportation elements. Earlier this week, the department sent out an email, just revising, it's the same questionnaire, but just sending it out to the new members. The hope is that the new members, but also previous members, had filled it out and then would fill it out by the next month meeting. So then we could review the transportation and the community services element and then review the responses to that as well. So right now, it's just an update and then showing, kind of directions on how to fill it out, and then showing an example of what it is. If you don't mind going through that and filling out the questionnaire, I'll send out another email after tonight's meeting, just sending out a reminder with the link. And just, if you have any issues, feel free to contact the department. We'll be happy to help. But overall, the goal would be to go through each goal, objective, and policy, and then provide specific input. We'd review that at the next meeting, going through each goal, objective, and policy. And then that feedback would be consolidated and provided to the Citizen Oversight Group. So when they get to the community services and the transportation elements, they already have feedback from 8 sitting council members and available for any questions.
Mr. Marshall.
So for those of us, I think, and I was gonna ask you, I think I've done this,
If you've already filled it out, then
but how do we know that other than getting in and doing it?
I can check it.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So then the question would be, the other 4 that aren't with us anymore, did they do it?
I can confirm that as well. How we proposed and put this out as the responses, we don't want to call it, and we can, if it's a motion we can entertain tonight. If we want to have the council member's name next to the response that we get, that's fine. What we did for Economic Development Committee, just for reference, we put response 1, 2, 3, 4, knowing that an individual with that committee answered it, but not specifically tying it to the council member. That said,
You could try, the way we did that other survey, I think we all, well, the new guys didn't do it yet, but you put in there, obviously, who you are.
Yeah.
But then it's anonymized after
And
that.
I don't find it easy to save that. And
Yeah,
It seems
right.
really difficult. So then I go back, I wonder how I answered that. So.
Yeah, so maybe we could try,
I'm
I
curious.
can help you figure that out.
you can also, if you'd like, I can go in there.
I
and
spend
print
a lot of
out
time.
responses out too. Absolutely. Anyway, so if someone would like the response, I could print it out in Word doc or something like that.
When was this? I don't remember. If I didn't do it,
It
let
was-
me know.
It was approved, yeah, I can send out an email after this, but it was approved back in March, but then it sent out in an email. And then I sent out an email earlier this week with the link, just with the new committee makeup. But other than that, it hasn't been something we've been hounding on, but we are getting closer to the community services element. So we're just wanting to, it's fine if we don't need to go through it this month, but if we want
Yeah.
to tackle it next month, it'd be very helpful for the.
I think maybe just look and see, if you can see who's done it
Yep,
and
I can send that out.
whoever hasn't, just resend.
Is the whole committee here comfortable with me saying who has and hasn't? Okay.
Yeah.
In that case, we can vote.
Be a lot easier.
I motion we rat out those who haven't taken it.
Yeah.
Try to avoid that.
All right, any other questions on the master plan stuff? Okay. That brings us to kind of this next couple items are actually sort of all interrelated. They stem from a conversation that Administrator Lee and the mayor and I had with our prosecuting attorney. That's kind of an initiative that Mayor Garitano is wanting to do every few months. He's kind of asked to meet with Molly, not to like twist her arm or anything on any of that stuff, but to just make sure that, we as a city council are doing whatever we can to kind of help facilitate what they need to do. And then just kind of philosophically making sure everybody's working together. We did talk to her, although the citations haven't started coming to her yet, but all of the safe street stuff that we've done the last, couple months, that's all now starting to make their way through. So one of the issues that Mayor Garitano and I brought up was the kind of ongoing excessive noise that seems to happen up and down 100 and certain parts of Clayton, and I'm sure it's in other areas too, but we get a lot of calls about those kinds of things. So one of the suggestions that our prosecuting attorney made was for us to look into the idea of creating a municipal ordinance against excessive vehicle noise. That would basically be, more or less it's loud engines and things, but it could also apply to loud stereos and stuff like that. We can certainly go through the memo. The memo was, I kind of made the memo based on kind of standard best practices for municipalities in general, but then specifically ones around us. So the idea is, in an ideal world, like if we outfit the police with a decibel meter, basically, that's great. Their body cameras function more or less the same way. So I don't know, but I think like some of the things we've also done in the past, I don't know that we're gonna go out and just start immediately writing 1 million tickets about loud cars. But the idea is, as we kind of talked about with a lot of these items, there are a handful of residents that we have in our city and visitors that come through that just don't really seem to care about sort of the general philosophy of what we do around here. So this is maybe more to help facilitate those conversations. So if anybody has any questions or concerns, I want to talk a little bit more about it, we certainly can. It basically lays out different offenses, how that all works. John Young, obviously our city attorney, will check this to make sure that it is correct before it goes to the full council, but I'm pretty confident that this is pretty solid. Tom, you got anything you want to add?
Yeah, we do, and just a quick note, we do have a current section of our city code that outlaws noise in some capacity. How it works though is that it's based off the decibels, the decibel reading from the property line, and it's based off a continuity of time. So it stretches anywhere from 2 minutes, and you can be louder for 2 minutes, but then it goes all the way up to 60 minutes and 60 minutes of sustained noise. At that point, it's the lowest threshold to really get started. That said, would be a little bit more geared towards moving vehicles. What the other ordinance was looking to do was, trying to outlaw, loud businesses from operating after hours. It changes at night, has a little bit more stricter decibel readings, and allows us to have some type of mechanism if we're standing at the edge of the property line, how much noise is that business producing? Same goes, that's why it has the timing mechanism. A lot of thought went into that part, was that, if somebody has an accident or something that occurs at night, that, it's a quick bang and, maybe they drop something. You're not gonna get the police necessarily called on you just for that. But this is more so figuring out a way to gear it towards supplying our officers with a way to monitor noise coming from a vehicle, and then also looking at the modified exhaust system, and being able to write the ticket for it, having that almost be an addendum, an add-on to what might other be a ticket when they're pulling over. So this is more so geared towards vehicles.
Yeah, just cars.
So over the years, we've had a tremendous challenge with people with motorcycles out in fields and property they don't live on, but nobody else could stand it. People with swimming pools with really loud sound systems on them.
Mhm.
So I know we have an ordinance for that. This would be more specific for a moving violation for an automobile and not one for a residential violation or a.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the motorcycle would still apply because it is a vehicle.
The problem was there, it wasn't on a public street.
That's okay.
It was in a field, and they had the police then had to be careful because they were trespassing into the field to try to get the monitors to work.
So I would say, I mean, the way I kind of have understood this from Molly's explanation was basically this would enable an officer, if somebody called and said, hey, somebody's like revving their dirt bike in this field or whatever. This would enable an officer to show up, more or less have probable cause that this vehicle is louder than the 85 decibels that it says it can be. and then
Right
have
away.
that conversation, yeah. But I think more than anything, this is gonna be for those guys that are racing up and down 100 and, you know.
I just think we explained to the council, we need to get some clarity there as to what it is and what it isn't.
Mhm.
Because I think that we have certainly mushed them together over the years. Same way with power lines, the noise under a power line, where there was a whole separate bunch of ordinances trying to, how do you quiet down Ameren's power lines? Because there are people just gone crazy with the noise.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm all for kind of tackling, I mean, we've had a lot of sound studies and different things and people complaining and, you know, to me, a lot of the stuff that we do in here, I don't usually like Band-Aids to fix stuff, but this is one she felt pretty confident was very necessary in our chat. So yeah, I think we can have a wider conversation, but I think it's something to pursue for sure. Yes, sir.
I was gonna just ask, with the level of detail we've got from this synopsis, and then the recommendation, second from last, and then the proposed motion. Is it time for a motion?
If anybody would like.
One more question,
Yes,
I
sir.
guess. This is an addition to what we currently. have.
Yeah,
It doesn't-
Yeah, it's not replacing anything. It's in addition to, so all of the regular noise stuff stays put.
And then the city attorney would also just make sure that when they're lining these kind of framework up, that it would be only 2 vehicles, so moving, and I mean, we could make it so it's only on public right of way if we want to identify it that way in the definitions. But also tying it directly to, it's a little bit different because it's the 85 decibels, or it gives a little bit of a different perspective. If the police officer can hear the noise 150 feet away, that's different than our current code. So we'll make sure it lines up with our current existing code, but this would be different.
It should make it a little easier, less, they don't have to put a decibel limit. So yeah, if anybody has anything else, great. If not, Mr. Mabry, did you want to make a motion?
Motion
All
for
right.
approval of this proposal.
All right, so Mr. Mabry makes the motion to approve the draft excessive vehicle noise ordinance for legal review by the city attorney, authorize staff to initiate enforcement tools and officer training, blah, 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 and schedule the ordinance for reading for the city council. Amy, I can send all this to you. Anybody care to second? Mr. Albers will second. All those in favor of moving our noise ordinance forward, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that
We had
motion.
one more note. I know we
Yeah.
just voted, but one thing this may entertain as we kind of get into, well, we'll have to get through it with reviewing and drafting the ordinance, but one thing that might come up is we may need more decibel readers to issue with our police officers. So just something that would potentially come up in the future is, hey, we want to enforce this, we might need the equipment to do so. So we have one that works well. We technically have 2, but one that works decently reliably. So in this case, if we want to make sure all officers are outfitted with it, that's where I do think it's really important that audible noise at 150 feet, they got that camera that turns on and, you know, the judge could look at it and see it's 150 feet clearly, then that hopefully, you know, kind of sets that apart. Because the decibel, it does get a little bit wonky whenever, right now with the noise, if it's 2 minutes versus 60 minutes, it just gets a little too technical.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like this motion that I will send over to Amy basically says for you guys to figure out how much that costs, if that's what we need, so. And that's,
and whether we really need to buy them all at one time.
yeah, right, exactly.
I
Yes,
just have
ma'am.
a question after this is all said and done now. Would this, and cause I have no idea what 85 decibels, what's gonna register at that. Is this more like vehicles that have been altered and
Yeah.
special, not like a big, huge pickup truck that drives through the subdivision and lives down the street from you? And
It
cause I
could be
hear that
altered,
from
that
people,
exhaust
like-
could be too high.
Yeah, this is more for like altered exhaust or big, mostly altered exhaust, but it could also be like big stereo systems and things like that.
Okay, that's good. I'd like a clarification then from Mr. Lee. A big manly mega truck rolling coal can sound at 115 decibels if it feels like it, and it can be 60 decibels if the individual is human. So this would apply to a coal rolling mega truck.
It would be up to the officer discretion, but yeah, it would apply if they wanted to
That thing's
decide.
gonna be a lot more than any 85 decibels if he's got his foot stomped off the stoplight.
I think the idea would be it gives the officers the discretion to have that, I mean, if it's a truck that is, you know, it's just loud, that's whatever, but if this is more for people that are stomping off the line and zipping up and down at 85 miles an hour and.
This will let them know that there is a ticket involved.
Correct. Yeah.
They'll slow
I
down.
just didn't catch that level
And-
of distinction.
You know, it's kind of designed towards, we started this conversation a little bit last meeting, Lauren brought it up, where like, you know, some of the exhaust stuff that some of the kids are putting on now. I've got a young man right up the street from my house that has a super loud car, and I'm sure it's really cool. It's just not that cool at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Why I asked.
So yeah, so that's kind of what it's for. Okay, that brings us to our next piece, which also came from this conversation with Molly, which is basically a proposed data transparency policy. And what that is saying is whether it's the municipal court or the enhanced reporting that we're working on with our police partners or even some code enforcement things, it's defining specifically the type of information that we can get and how to basically safely transport that over so that it's not being improperly used by anybody. It's also, there are certain areas, as all of you know, when we have closed session that are having legal conversations, some of this may blend into that if it's necessary. But this is basically to talk about some of the new reporting for code enforcement that we're gonna work on this year and our enhanced court reporting right now for those of you guys that are new. It's like every month we get a report from the court, which is more or less an accounting report. It's just kind of talks about how much money we're bringing in or not, which is not really what we care about. It's not what we're about. So this is gonna help to, we're gonna work with our court clerk to get this defined a little bit better. So we can kind of get a better picture of, is code enforcement sending 200 violations to the court and then the court is figuring out 165 of them and then another 45 do this, and then they're in big court for these other things. Like, it's just helping us get the information we need, basically by ward, not by street or by address or anything like that, so we can figure this stuff out. The other thing that, especially our code enforcement things, we'll talk about is what we're gonna get to at the end, which is this code harmony situation we're gonna try to put together. But basically, what we got from Molly and what we've had conversations with Mr. Vunich and our code enforcement people is, after the events in 2014 in Ferguson, there was a lot of rules that got changed at the state level that altered how cities are able to enforce certain things. And in my personal opinion, I think probably that was a good thing, but also we have not modernized what we're doing after that. So we are still stuck in a system that doesn't actually work anymore. So now we're gonna try to shift a little bit of that. And what a big part of that is getting some real data that's coming in. So I know at least a couple of us get the police report that we see at public safety and it's in the other thing. It's gotten better from where it was. It's going to continue to get better. And that way we're able to kind of communicate to our residents what are going on. At the end of the day, for those of you that are new to the council, you'll get some calls from people about code enforcement issues. And currently it kind of like goes into a bit of a black hole. It's like, we talked to them. That's all we know. This is supposed to kind of help that a little bit and also help some efficiency stuff. So, Tom, anything you want to add?
Just that we're also looking to kind of retool the toolbox with how we can automate this. And that's gonna involve doing an RFP, which will come back here. Done, we're going to publish that probably within the next week. And we have some vendors, so we talked about it a couple months ago, but a couple vendors that look promising because they can integrate GIS data, so it helps with the geospatial. It really what it does, it points out reported code violations, so we can look at it on a map. If our code enforcement officers, which we do currently have 2 and one wears 2 hats as a code inspector as well, that individual is able, they ride together for safety purposes as well to ensure that, just with the nature of the job, we can kind of circle out with a map, hey, I have 5 violations that have been reported over in the western portion of Wildwood today. Maybe we knock those out. So that's the helpful tool of it, is you can go in there and then you can actually update it with some of these tools. You can update it with a tablet or something that's in the field. So the hope is then to be able to print out a ticket right then and there as well, which will involve some equipment, but overall will really help streamline efficiency.
Yeah, so this is like we have done with our financial changes previously. So this is sort of like part 1 of a multi-part thing. The first part being, this is the type of data that we would like to receive, and then we report that out to our partners, and then we, in theory, start receiving that data. So anybody have any questions or concerns on that? Not, we have, yes, sir.
A couple. I think this is fantastic, but the one concern I have is all of these reports being done quarterly. and before a budget. I think what happens is if we do this, we end up then waiting until December or late before we get into the budget, and it's like, well, we don't know how to budget that.
Yep.
I would just throw out a suggestion that maybe we look at like a trimester reporting, where you've got 4 months of history
Mhm.
and you can project that out to try to get us to where we don't have a dozen reports that you're waiting for staff to get done before we can say we want to put something in the budget or not. So just more or less a different way of looking at how to report it so that we're not dumping it all at everybody, because it's hard enough to get people to come to a budget meeting. The budget's gotta be done by November, technically before we get to December. To wait for that fourth quarter wouldn't really be very meaningful this year.
In kind of my ideal scenario, I think what this is like, we will get actually monthly reports, and then the culmination is, hey, here's the quarterly report is, these are the trends that we're seeing. So
Absolutely.
we don't have to do
Well, and I
that.
think the other thing is when you sit down with the prosecutor, you sit down with the judge to do the evaluations, they're asking what can you do? We don't have anything to share with them. We're
Right.
sitting there saying, well, what do you think we should do?
Yep.
I think having the information would be great. So that's my only concern is everything is to be done on a quarterly basis. That takes a lot of manpower, not if we get it all automated, but we
Yeah.
gotta start somewhere, so.
Yep. All right, so we have a proposed motion in here. If anybody, I'm happy to read it. We can change it however you guys want. But the proposed motion is to move to adopt the municipal data transparency policy as outlined in this memo, direct staff to begin issuing monthly reports in the specified format starting next month, and require the Admin and Public Works Committee to conduct an annual policy review each December based on fourth quarter data to assess performance, recommended adjustments, and support continuity into the following year. We can certainly change that if you guys want at the end, but the general gist, yes, sir.
As a motion, well, I don't hog the floor, but I'll make a motion for it with the change.
Okay, and you want to do the change to trimesters or?
I want to do the change that we're making decisions, not annual policy review in December, which is the month of
Yeah.
deadline for budgets. I'd like to move this back to September of each year.
Okay.
So that we're making decisions about this in September so that we've got 3 months to budget it. And it doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
You said you think we should get monthly reports on it.
Yeah, so we're gonna get monthly reports. The review part is, as a committee, we are gonna look at this whole plan and then figure out, like, do we like what's happening? Do we need to make a change? Do we need to alter what's going on? So it's really just a matter of when do we wanna do
Would
that?
we get them in conjunction with this meeting?
We'll get them, my idea, the thought would be the same way Tom sends them out now. They'll just be in,
They can be, the idea right now would be to include it with the weekly CA report.
Yeah.
And it would be, since it's monthly, it'll just be attached, the same report would probably be attached 4 weeks in a row, but then that fifth week, I would call out, hey, the updated reports here.
Okay.
And then we could have it as a standing item for information too. if
Yeah,
we wanted to.
we could totally do that.
I think that's not a problem. either.
yeah, I mean, the hope is, and I've looked into it, and as Tom said, they're looking into it too, like, we should be able to get a pretty easily understandable dashboard together pretty quickly, and we can do it. At the end of the day, we would like to have a public facing one, so residents can actually kind of look this up, not that we don't want them to call us, but sometimes it's just one more step they gotta make. So yeah, so the real question then, the only difference is we can review it in September if that's what we wanna do, that, doesn't matter to me.
This thing about the December made me think about the whole thing about all different department specialties,
Mhm.
public safety.
Yep.
Historic preservation review. And that having everything pile up in December can't work.
Correct.
And we have to triage to make something number one. You can't have 12 number ones. So public safety, and then name a couple others. And even though I'm on historical preservation commission, that's not number one. That
Yeah.
takes the money that's left over after public safety and public administration and
Yep.
things that are important. So change this to September so that we
Yep.
can have our numbers by October, and it's in ahead of the game before historical preservation, which can wait until December.
Sure.
But I'm not that kind of a policymaker in this committee, so I just wondered how much logical sense that makes to everybody.
Got to start somewhere.
Yeah, makes sense to me. So, Amy, I'll email this to you too, but, so we're basically going to approve the memo as outlined, with the change being that review will happen in September instead of December. Mr. Mabry has made the motion. Anybody care to second it?
Second.
All right, Mr. Mr. Becker seconds it. All those in or any discussion on, further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed and any abstentions? Okay. That brings us to the next phase of this, which is our court reporting framework. So again, we had this conversation with Molly. We're going to have a conversation with our court clerk to just kind of work through how to make this look better. But this is sort of laying out more or less what we want. And then we're gonna do something similar. I've already started having some conversations with Captain Mundell on the police side of it. And I've had conversations with Mr. Vunich on the code enforcement side of it. So this is basically just a framework to lock in, and then we can have the conversation to get it put together. So if anybody has any questions or concerns or thoughts on the framework, we can certainly do that. Tom, you got anything you want to add to it?
No, other than if there any questions you have.
If not, I'm happy to take a motion that would be to adopt our monthly court reporting framework as part of the data transparency policy starting next month. And then Tom and our city clerk and probably me will work together to get that figured out. And then the idea would be the reports will come, as we said, they'll come every month. They will create a quarterly sort of trending thing and then annual. All right,
Go ahead. Tracy.
motion made by Ms. Nyan, seconded by Mr. Albers. And the motion is to adopt the proposed monthly court reporting framework as part of the data transparency policy starting in July of 2025. And to designate the court clerk and city administrator to coordinate implementation and require quarterly summary memos and a December annual, well, actually, we'll roll that back to September annual review to assess trends, performance, and alignment with city policy goals. Any questions before we go forward? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, this last piece, I've had some pretty extensive conversations with Mr. Vunich about it. So for our new members, as Tom said, we've got a couple code enforcement officers. They technically report to Melanie and then to Joe. It's kind of a thing. But in having a lot of conversations with Mr. Vunich, the thing he thinks would be most helpful, and I agree, and then he will actually probably join us next month for our meeting to talk more specifics on how this is gonna work. But what he wanted to really try to lock down and then from us and then have it move to the council pretty quickly is a sort of guiding principle on how we as a city want to look at code enforcement. You know, obviously codes are there for a reason and they need to be enforced on all of those things. But the code policy, the principle that we came up with was code enforcement in Wildwood exists to maintain property standards, protect neighborhood character, and promote safety, not to generate revenue or create unnecessary hardship. This principle reinforces that enforcement is about protecting community integrity, not punishment. So we have some key pillars in here on how that will work. This is all gonna be part of a much larger conversation that at the moment I came up with Code Harmony, which I thought sounded fun and people might like it. But basically, we're kind of looking at more or less rebooting how we handle our enforcement. So we've talked about at a certain point getting like printers in the trucks. So right now it's like a lot of back and forth if the guys go out and they find a violation and they technically have to give it to a person or go through this whole process. So the idea would be they can get their pictures, print it right off. If they're there, they hand it to them. If not, they leave it and then they can mark in the system, this wasn't a handoff, and then an immediate certified mail is sent. So it's a lot less like manual back and forth labor, which I think will help because according to Molly, and we haven't had a full conversation with our city judge yet, but kind of the overwhelming conversation that they had when a code enforcement issue gets to the court is basically like, I don't understand what they want me to do. And I believe wholeheartedly when Mr. Vunich says there's no possible way that that is true. And so he is actually gonna go to the next code enforcement court just to listen to hear what's going on. But I know at least in my ward, this is like one of the biggest things I hear about. I know it's a huge deal to Mayor Garetano to get this code enforcement thing sorted out in a way that works for everybody. And I just think, as we said, like from what Molly was telling us, we've been operating under a very misguided, outdated way of doing this since at least 2014. So we just need to kind of look at it, and this is the first part. So happy to, Tom, you can add anything if you'd like, but happy to talk about the philosophy, or if you guys like it, we can send that for a bigger conversation. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. So, and you're right, this is an issue. This is probably the number one thing I hear about is people call you and say, this is this, my neighbor's doing that, whatever. But, and I know they're super busy, so will this going forward, and is it now only when a resident brings an issue to mind, or is code enforcement out and they're somewhere and they see something else over here? The one that pops to my mind, because I hear about it all the time, is trash cans.
Yeah.
Like out in front of someone's garage and they're forward facing drive. Now, I'm not gonna like go around and take down numbers and like, I'm not here to be the trash can police. But that's my question. When code enforcement is, do they ever just go out and about and give random, I'm not saying I want them to, I'm just asking, like.
If they
what's the-
notice something's illegal, they'll
Okay.
typically cite them if they're out there. So, yeah, that's, but with a trash can, then.
That's just an example. I
So
mean,
according to Director Vunich, which again, he's been at this for a very long time, so I have all the trust in the world that he is doing this to the very best of his ability. Our philosophy as a city is almost exclusively the code enforcement issues are resident generated. So one of the things that we're working on is like, I have a couple of residents in my ward that have the same issue every single year at the same time. And so rather than having to call and report that, this system is going to try to kind of queue up a situation where it's like, hey, these are the issues that need to happen. And so, we don't need to be the people that are driving, like, we don't want them, as I told Joe, and he agrees, I don't want these guys out there with like a ruler measuring grass and things like that. But when we have people that are kind of like, it's like, if you go by 1 week and the trash cans are out, like, maybe something happened. If you go by a couple weeks and they're still out, probably just go and remind those people, hey, just put these behind your house. That's what we have this thing for. I think we have a situation where these guys are really very swamped with what is going on, and they're pulled in a lot of different directions, and it's philosophically, it is a rough go. I mean, it's an unfun, I have to imagine.
It's gonna be the hardest job in the world.
To do.
Yeah.
But this, giving them the right tools and figuring out, and also having the budget conversation on, is 2 people the right number? Should it be, because right now we technically have 2, but it's really like 1.5. And so, we just need to figure this out. And we're gonna do this more and more with a lot of these things where it's a question of, this is what we've budgeted, these are the resources that we've been using, but is this the right resources that we're using? And if it's not, then we just need to have those kinds of conversations. So, to me, I am a big believer in like, you gotta be able to keep, Rick does a great job of keeping the roads not full of potholes where he can. We have to be able to do the day-to-day stuff before we can do whatever other cool stuff we wanna do. So I'm a big fan of free hot dogs and concerts and events and all these things. I think it's all great, all the parks, but we gotta be able to pay for the things that we need to get run first. Yes, sir.
It's probably been done before, but can we communicate the highlights of code enforcement, like in the Gazette going forward, or?
Yeah.
Or,
I've had some conversations, and I know Tom has as well, with Paula, who's our new
Yeah.
Director of Communications, to try to really kind of like genuinely frame some of these things. We were just talking about this with whatever they're doing at Green Pines, like, I'm sure it's great. Would have been super awesome to know ahead of time to be able to give people a heads up. So we're gonna try to do a much better job of that.
it'd be along the same lines, people, I know you can go online and do it, but like permit or no permit,
Mhm.
and things. I mean, that, you probably get that sometimes, right? Hey, my neighbor is building a shed in his backyard or something like that, so,
And typically we can look it up and see
Right,
if they,
right.
they've got a permit, we know for sure.
right,
If not,
okay. But it just wouldn't be a good idea to highlight it in some of our,
Yeah, and I think
Right.
talking about those issues, like the trash can thing, that's just a conversation piece that, put out a post, put out a code enforcement Wednesday or whatever we wanna call it, post, like, hey, just a reminder, put your trash cans behind your house. That's a rule. Here's the rule.
And and you might.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I think of communication on this to residents, I mean, we can use the data creatively. I mean, we can see, what are the top 5 issues that are repeat customers here in Wildwood? Like, are we citing people for trash? Is it for tall grass, whatever it might be? It's probably gonna be some of the, traditional suspects, but communicating that in the Gazette, like, hey, over the last 6 months or the last year, here are the items that we are finding in the community. Be on the lookout because it's against the law, that kind of messaging. Also, there's a way you can do it where you also say, hey, it's not just against the law, it's helping you maintain your property value too. So it's the flip side of it as well. It's not always painting doom and gloom.
Mr. Van.
I'm certain you guys triage these things.
Yeah.
As far as importance goes, but in my neighborhood, just for example, we had a pod units out in the street. Not weeks, but months. And now we're talking an issue with.
Oh, a moving pod?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now we're talking an issue as far as fire truck access and stuff like that. I mean, safety issue. And I was no longer a member of the homeowners association at the time, but I got the impression from the people that were still on the board that they felt like nothing could be done and that the city couldn't do much either.
No, that's an easy one to address. If you just give us a call, we'll take care of it.
Yeah, we had a pod.
Good. Try to be quickly
Good to
on.
know.
The big issue that we found in the pod thing came up because I have a gentleman in my neighborhood that has a landscaping company, and every winter he puts a pod and loads all his stuff in, and every spring he gets rid of the pod and unloads his stuff, and it is less expensive for him to do it that way and pay his code violations and go to court and do all the stuff than
Yeah.
to do what he should be doing.
Hopefully he's not your neighbor.
He is not, but he is close.
Yeah.
And so it's, that was part of this conversation we were having with Molly, where we do need to start looking kind of creatively at how we do this, because after the Ferguson incidents, like there really are like genuine handcuffs that have been put on cities, not just ours, as to how much you can charge people on all these things. So in the case, just because we did the math of the resident in my ward, it's $1,200 worth of fines. And I am certain that for the 6 months that thing was out there, that is less money than it would have taken to put it.
Yeah,
Wherever
those are
it's-
$300 a month
Yeah.
for storage.
Right.
So
So it's,
You gotta
to
look
them,
at-
it's a cost of doing business, and then, we just have to figure out a better way to do it, I guess.
Liens on the house?
Yeah, I think at a certain point, we can do liens and things like that. I mean, right now, there are some reviews that we will do. I think the big thing will be, we wanna try to make it very clear that there are just certain residents that don't care. They don't care about code enforcement. They don't care about any of that stuff. The vast majority of our residents do and get it. We had a conversation, we'll talk about this when he comes to join us, but we have homes that require abatement because, the residents are elderly or they just can't, afford to do whatever it is. And so, we have a limited amount of money that Mr. Vunich taps in to do those kinds of things. I wanna do a better job of tracking how that works. So that our residents understand, like, we wanna make it clear from a communication standpoint, this is the process, and as much as this process, quite frankly, kind of sucks, like, this is what it is. So this property perhaps has had, 70 code violations written on it. We've talked, there's some, unique characters in our city that have all kinds of stuff going on at their.
they know the rules better than we do.
That's right, and they're happy to try to exploit them the best they can. So in this case, what we're wanting to do is make sure that from our committee that this philosophy makes sense. We'll have that larger conversation at the council level. And then we build our policy basically based on that. So, to me, based on Mr. Vunich's conversation and, the best way I can describe it, like, we don't want the code enforcement Gestapo out there checking light bulbs and whatever it is. But when we do have these areas that need real assistance, that's where we need good communication and flow. So we're gonna build those parts out, but this is part one. Yes, sir.
Yes, thanks. I'd heard before from Director Bunich about the foibles and episodes with code enforcement. And exactly the types of challenges, it's cheaper to pay the fines.
Mhm.
So what I looked for in this was what could be used as legally defensible escalating schedule of discipline, just common with children, organizations. I didn't see that. Mr. Lee,
I can answer that. How it works in a traditional sense, if someone's a repeat offender, they're causing a lot of issues, they're just not addressing the matter. Typically, what you're gonna wanna do is cite them, go through the court process, have them rule that, yes, it was illegal, and then to rectify it. They don't do that, cite them again. You'll double the fine at that one time, which brings it to like $500. But then after that, it stays consistent at that 500 change. So then go through the process again, cite them again, go through the process again, do that for 6 months and have multiple convictions. At that point, you then are now suing them. You're taking it out and going into more so a circuit case, and you're gonna go get an injunction from a circuit judge to have them mediate or do whatever you need to do to rectify the situation. So typically, you're proving 6 months worth of convictions and then carrying that forth to a separate judge.
what you just described, is that a Missouri thing? Is that a federal thing? Is that a statistical monetary return
It's
for
mostly a
effort?
Missouri thing.
It's a Missouri thing, but it's also more of like an informal policy too. It's like you need enough backup, because the circuit judge is not gonna, if you don't have that history where there's multiple convictions, where you have to show that you've been using the tools you have at your disposal, it's not working, now I'm escalating it to you. If they see that proof, just like how Mr. Boonish communicated that maybe the judge sometimes gets the sob story and then takes, and I don't know, the judge can't communicate with the judge from this city administrator's perspective, but that information, we gotta make sure it's airtight. And then the judge has nothing to question other than, oh, there's 4 convictions here, you still haven't fixed the issue. I'm gonna write an injunction for you to remove it. Then the sheriff's department would go out to effectuate that change. It's unfortunate, but sometimes that.
I was just gonna say, most subdivisions, this is dealing with a resident, aren't in a position to go to a lawsuit. They don't have the funds for that. And that's like you were saying, these guys know more than we do. And I'm kind of speaking from just some direct experience here lately. But, you know, most subdivisions don't have the funds to go to court, and if they lose, pay for all the court fees then. So it's
Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue. We have, you know, the thing that Mr. Boonish said about this, which I think is very true, is, you know, he said if you look at the city of St. Louis, so like downtown St. Louis, he said at a certain point, people just stopped caring about a lot of those properties.
right.
And so his feeling is, you know, obviously we're a long ways away from that here, but that, you don't know where that point is. And so what we don't wanna have is people that are able to kind of like game the system and drag this stuff out, and then the other people around them are like, well, this guy doesn't do anything, why do I have to do this either? And so our kind of process here is to try to highlight in a way, the rarity of the like handful of people that are there all of the time. And one of the things that I know Mayor Garetano wants to do, and well, city administrator is very correct, like we don't get to influence the judge on this stuff, but we can explain to him our philosophy, which is, hey, you know, we're not about penalizing people that can't pay for things, that's not what we're talking about. But if we have a person who just doesn't like, clearly is playing a game here, we don't need to extend this time frame out anymore. And from our city process flow, we wanna minimize that as much as we can too. So right now, we wanna make sure if an enforcement thing is put, the next visit is in 5 days or whatever it is, and there's a report that says they were there, it's still not fixed, here's the next step. And so we can report that back and forth, whereas right now, it just kind of is like, it's going through the system. Mr. Marshall, you got something?
Yeah, a couple things. So, and this must have been before Florissant or before Ferguson. We actually had police officers that were assigned to go out and do code enforcement with the code enforcement officer because they were able to write a citation for them. Did that go away? in
Yeah.
Ferguson
I did go
regulation,
with
so
Ferguson.
you can't take it to that next step.
Police don't have anything to do with it anymore.
Well, in some cases, though, I mean, if we have an issue where we're short-staffed, or if we have an emergency where it's kind of it's gonna be a public safety issue, then we will call in the police, even though.
I mean, I know that we went through a process of making sure they were certified.
Yep.
To do that, and then they realized it wasn't a criminal thing, it was a compliance issue.
Alright.
That seemed to work better than with the judge back at that point.
Typically, it's one of those things where it's gotta be, that individual who's doing whatever has to be kind of emerging into that gray area.
Yeah.
And if that happens, then we can typically call upon our police partners, but most cases need to be handled by dedicated staff that are.
So I guess my next question would be, and I think this is where it just always comes down to the communication. I end up spending so much time trying to explain to trustees what the city can and can't do. And I think if we could do a couple things as a city, now that we have a communications person, is like one Wednesday a month. Get the email addresses from the trustees and just send them facts about what the city can do and facts about how they can do what they can do. And they look at their indentures when they were put in, because honest to God, they don't know.
Most of their indentures are invalid now anyway.
And they don't wanna argue over it. It's like, I had no idea, okay?
Right.
So I mean, part of that communication, I think, in this whole situation, because I did have somebody call me back and they were so excited because they received the acknowledgement back that somebody in the subdivision applied for a permit. I said, that is just fantastic. We've never had that before. So I mean, I think that it's at a point where we could use this whole thing to our advantage to really try to get the trustees because they have right next to the compliance officer, they have the worst job of everybody complaining and nobody wanting to take any accountability for it. So increasing the communication to them about what they can and can't do. The subdivision I live in, Babbler Parks Estates, they actually have on their website that you can click right on it. It goes right into all the city codes on what you can and can't do. And you'll still find one where they're questionable. But I think the more we could do to build that reliance back with the trustees and not fight them or not put them in those situations would be a real gain for getting the support of the trustees and homeowners in a lot of these areas, because there's nothing worse than them trying to figure out what to do to the jerk down the street. So.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the homes, at least where we're at, were all built mostly by the same people. And so those indentures are just sort of copies of the same thing. And having redone ours a couple years ago, many of them were nowhere close to being legally appropriate. And even then, it's kind of goes back to this Ferguson situation, like there's not a whole lot of enforcement we can do. I mean, at least I know in my subdivision, we have City and Village that takes care of a lot of our stuff. They do a lot of the ones around town.
They do ours.
It used to be, if you don't pay your dues, they put a lien on your house. Now it's if you don't pay your dues for 5 years, they put a lien on your house. And it's like, well, what happens between then and now? And they're like, I don't know. So I do think putting some resources together for HOAs and our residents, just say, hey, these are the things that, an HOA is responsible for. These are the things that a city could be responsible for. And quite frankly, these are things that nobody can do anything about.
Years and years ago, we used the first Monday of a 5-Monday month, had it open for trustees. Standing room only in City Hall. You couldn't get in there because we didn't have the internet capabilities to look up everything. But they were like sponges. Well, how would we do this? I'm brand new as a trustee. I have no idea. So I mean, part of that communication is they're out there dealing with it. And I think we could be a much bigger value to our residents and them to support us on some of these other issues if we figure out how to bring them into the loop. And I think part of that would be establishing, if they're so excited about getting the notification of the permits, then we need to get their email addresses. So
Yeah.
when they start doing the right
Well,
things.
yeah, they're not right.
Yeah. But I think they don't realize what they're getting if they knew that, and that's just part of communicating to who they are. So I think it's great. I think it's a real opportunity to really close the circle and get more communication with them.
So you, on the indenture, you're saying a lot of them are not
Yeah. I mean, like-
appropriate because they're 20 to 30 years old?
Yeah, and
basically?
a lot of them, and I mean, this is even more so in municipalities that are older than ours, like
Yeah.
they have really weird provisions in there that you can't do. Some of our stuff is like, the HOA doesn't have any enforcement mechanism, and then it's not a code thing, so the city doesn't have any enforcement mechanism, so it's just nothing. And we found in some reason, like we had conflicts to city codes, they were opposite of what the
Yeah.
city wanted. So it's expensive and time consuming to get those fixed, and like the people just like, sort of like us in a way, like they're just volunteering to do this. They don't have any idea how to do this stuff.
They came in last at the meeting and they're the
Right.
But see, one of the things that is kind of interesting is the indentures for years. trumped the city ordinances. The
Mhm.
problem was, all you had as a trustee was to go file small claims court.
Right.
But the city could write tickets.
Yeah.
So I mean, once we became a city, that was a big difference in how you could enforce that stuff, but it's a problem. I mean, I had people that, and we only had 26 homes, but they would not pay their assessment dues until December 31st, when I'd already filed the lien on their property.
Yeah.
Once the guy went to prison, we were good.
There you go. All right, so that brings us back to our motion. Unless anybody wants to make any changes to our philosophy, the motion suggested is move to adopt the code enforcement philosophy statement as presented, direct staff to incorporate this framework into all enforcement related operational procedures, software evaluations, and council briefings related to the Code Harmony Initiative.
So moved.
Mr. Marshall makes the motion. Mr. Albers seconds it. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Any discussion question?
Sure.
So when we do this, will we as council people get any feedback about what happened from the code enforcement stuff?
When you,
I have a challenge with chicken coops.
Mhm.
Not allowed to have them. Well, do you call back? Well, we talked to them about it. And then somebody else has one. Is, well, I have one but I never get anything back. I mean, I have to call and then Joe said, well, I'll get with Brian or, I'll get with Frank.
We're gonna get reporting. I mean, it's,
Something that lets us know, because when the
More
trustees call to complain, you'd like to be, at least say, hey, I did hear.
so two answers on that. One would be the high level reporting showing that it should be part of those statistics, and if it becomes part of a trend, it would be part of the description, but the automated system is where that comes in, because right now it's a little clunky. And that's why it's been embraced as well as it could, but we want to get to a place, and there's a couple, I'm not gonna do the technology because we have to do RP, but there's a couple technologies out there that, as long as the resident's willing to embrace the tech, they could go to a link on our website, they put in the address where the issue is occurring. They put in some other pertinent information so we can contact them, email specific, and they should get notifications throughout the process. So when someone edits the ticket, you can call it like a service ticket with IP, when someone edits the ticket, they should get a notice that, hey, someone's reviewing this, they did a site visit. It'll have like a triage step-by-step process, and they should get the notification all the way up until citation issued, and then at that point it is cut off because now it's a court matter, so they would have to. refer to the court.
That would be just great to be able to let the trustees know that there's something, I guess, otherwise all they do is call you every week.
Yeah,
It's
right.
like, well, I don't know, Frank's on vacation, we'll see if Brian's gonna do it next week, so you just don't know.
Yep.
So,
yeah, this is gonna be this is gonna be a real, like a real reboot of what's been happening. So I'm excited about that. Okay. That then brings us to our public works section. So, Mr. Brown, let's hear about our improvement projects, I guess.
Chair and council members, the first item is the summary of the current projects, MoDOT and city as well, provided to you for your information. It's an informational item.
Oh, hold on, Rick, we'll go back and vote.
I rudely interrupted the discussion.
You did. Let's vote then. So all those in favor of our motion to accept our code enforcement philosophy in the beginning of Code Harmony, I will send you the actual motion there, Amy. Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, back to you, Mr. Brown. All right.
Thank you. Again, this first item is an informational item, so it's an update of the current status of MoDOT and city projects, roadway projects around Wildwood. We got a very busy period of time right now. There's road construction pretty much everywhere you go, so I didn't intend to go through this in particular or detail. If there's any specific questions you might have about projects that are underway or soon to be started, be glad to entertain them right now.
The link didn't work, did it,
Which link?
in the agenda?
I can take a look.
I couldn't get it to open up this afternoon, so I thought it was just me.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a dead link. It just goes back.
The link currently is for update on MoDOT and city projects.
Admin
The link at
status
the
of
agenda wasn't
MoDOT
working.
City
It took you to the website.
Yeah, it just goes to the website.
Yeah, I just.
Okay.
Yeah, works for me.
I've
I've
got it.
Good.
working right now.
Mine came up code 404 under the website.
Well, I'm sure it's all going great.
No,
I'm sure it's a problem is in the computer, not in the.
You might try refreshing your browser. And I'll bet
wouldn't
you
do it
it's
on
an
the
old
computer,
link.
though.
We updated the memo and that's what's going on.
We did update the memo today, so you might have the,
I had an old one.
yeah, that could be it.
It's,
Refresh your browser when you reopen that window.
So-
It might grab a new.
Assuming everybody's got a glance at it. Does anybody have any questions on any questions or concerns? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just any updates from the
Yeah, I didn't have.
judge, I think it's a 3-judge panel.
Here it is.
It's gonna render some decision as far as.
So,
just today it would come up for.
This will be discussed probably in more detail, will be discussed, at least my expectation is Monday night at city council and probably in closed session. Yeah, that's fine.
Rick, are there any places, I mean, this isn't really the stuff that this is more, are there any issues that you are seeing that we're running into a lot, any problems? You know, out on 100, I know that they're closing a lot of, you know, obviously starting to take work and all that kind of stuff. Anything that we need to be more aware of than something else?
Nothing's jumping out at me right now, frankly, unless there's concerns you're aware of. I know, again, there's a lot going on and we were on Manchester Road resurfacing today. I assume they are wrapping up or have just wrapped up. They'll be headed down to Stricker Road. Weather permitting later or next, and that's gonna be, anytime we resurface roads east of 109, I get very nervous just because people get impatient. If they're patient, it works out pretty well, generally speaking.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
I foresee this being an issue and at the roundabout at Wild Horse and 109, it's great now because it's moving really fast because nobody can go, like there's no other traffic coming from
Only
there.
half open.
But I know when Wild Horse closes, which I believe will only be for about a week,
No, 14 days.
14 days. I'm just suggesting like some extra enforcement maybe on Old Etherton because people are gonna be heading through there to get from 109 to Wild Horse Creek. Instead of,
What I
well, they
would
do
do.
now, but I'm saying if that's the only way, other than going Centaur and all the way around, or totally going a different way, I'm just feeling in advance for a lot of those people that that is gonna be a major cut through. And it's kind of dangerous because it's narrow and it's, so I'm just throwing that out there. Something that they'll wanna watch as far as people, because it's a no cut through street, but people do it all the time.
Or, I mean, I don't know how that works with the traffic code, like, is it better? I mean, I'm all for trying to enforce it, but it's all gonna be hard to get police
Can't pull them over on the road.
Yeah.
there to stop them, so I'm wondering if it is possible in a temporary way
To allow it.
to allow it, but try to manage that in a much
Yeah.
safe fashion than one might
Cause that's
expect.
gonna be a tricky one, like, I don't know how you're gonna get a lot of places.
I live that
Yeah,
intersection at that acute angle and around a blind turn
It's
on top of
very-
it on a descending grade
Yeah, it's
with
hard.
brush in the way. By perfect stripes. I'm surprised more people aren't.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dead. The only way that's gonna work is a 100% full-time police officer stopping and allowing traffic to go by one way at a time. People who are not used to that intersection at the Etherton shortcut, we call it, they're not gonna know the rules, they're not gonna know the game or how to navigate that without getting killed.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, I don't know, Rick, what do you think? Is it better? I mean, people are going to go that way for sure.
Well, I guess I'd like to believe the roundabout will be far enough along in construction that it'll operate. And I'd have to check the plans and the staging to be 100% sure of that. And I guess I could do that and get back to you. But if that roundabout is far enough along in its construction and it operates as a roundabout, it may not be a problem whatsoever. Because the next phase is just the final connection of Etherton. So I think that they may well have the traffic in the circular pattern on the roundabout in that phase.
but just not being able to turn onto Wild.
You just won't be able to access Wild Horse, correct?
But I mean, to go down either way, if you're going down the back way or to Centaur, that's a long drive to get back around. So people are gonna, I mean, people are definitely gonna make that cut through. Yes, sir.
A question for Rick. Is it, aside from being legal, is it feasible to have the gas station involved in a temporary bypass to accomplish anything safer than that acute turn down there at Shortcut?
Relative to Atherton Road?
Well, just for that 2-week period of time.
So we're like letting them use that parking lot as like a cut through.
I mean, it's private property, so I think that's highly unlikely, quite frankly.
They've not been real supportive in the past.
Well, it's not designed for, MoDOT didn't approach them, they need a temporary easement, and those are things that have to get worked out over many months in advance, so I wouldn't expect that would be an option, unless we know someone with the service station is really looking to be a friend of the city.
Is there anyone who knows whether there's gonna be a detour sign forcing use of that shortcut?
Like, I don't think they.
You know, we're not gonna sign them onto Old Etherton. So that there will be. I have to check, when Wild Horse is closed, the detour would be to take South Etherton Road to Sun Power Road.
Where are they gonna close Wild Horse though? Like, how are people gonna, how far
Right at the
down?
roundabout,
is
it's
it?
gonna be shut
Yeah.
going west.
Yeah,
Yeah, but like, what happens if you get down there?
Well, how far are you?
Like, if you're trying to go,
West on Wild Horse,
yeah,
past the roundabout.
right. I mean, I just. What I know is that that is an incredibly complicated intersection and they are. Not planning on getting this done until December, right?
doesn't they have to have?
They're not doing this particularly quickly.
Yeah.
And like, I'm shocked there weren't more accidents before when everybody was like the Wild West and everybody know, I mean, I didn't even know how stop signs work there because everybody's coming from a different direction. So I'm just wondering if like I'm all for hoping for the best, but I would like to maybe if we can, just plan for the worst. So I don't know if it's a matter of like, logistically speaking, as much as they shouldn't, people are going to use that cut through. That is 100% what people are gonna do. So do we need to look at putting officers there or something else?
Why would they use I guess I'm confused why they would be inclined to use the cut through.
I just think, I've seen people using it now because it backs up
So
so.
using it now, that's one thing, but I don't know they'd be more inclined to use it when Wild Horse is closed. I don't know they understand that, but
I think people that are going that way are just gonna get, they're gonna get confused and their Waze is gonna tell them to go.
Like if you live
Somewhere
off
else.
109, like by the Rolfs, by that farm, you know what I'm talking about, where the horses are and all that. If you live in one of those subdivisions, Pine Creek, whatever, across there, and you need to go to Lafayette High School, how are you gonna get there?
you would,
Roundabout, that 109.
What?
Yeah, but that's only if
it's still open, you can still get through.
It's gonna be open
I
though.
think it'd be easier to get through, cause.
Yeah, so it's just.
It's just west, it's just west.
It's down by like
West
fire.
So.
Yeah, the old fire
Bring
station.
up an area.
Yeah.
They're closing that.
Just down past McGowan's house, so it's just going down a little bit further, and that's all the
Then
further.
I told everyone,
So they're just
they were
doing that
closing
taper
the
as I
other
looked at it, I
side.
think it's just a taper on the west side.
okay.
East is
finishing the west.
And north or south would be
So
fine.
can't
The
work
way
this
it's gonna
side.
work is they're gonna open up South Etherton. Obviously, this looks a lot different now, but you're gonna be able to, we're gonna come up here and get down 109, you can also go down South Etherton. You just won't be able to continue going west.
Okay.
That's.
So then you'll have to go
Two
down.
weeks, yeah.
Yep, you'll have to go down Centaur and then come right.
What are they building? Is that the construction, that like old brown house that's there? They were building, are they building a new parking lot or something in there for him? They were laying cement in there today. I'm
They
like, what are
replaced
they
their
doing?
parking lot. for
They
me.
They did some work for that one residence, yeah, to reestablish his parking lot and leave, yeah.
Oh, really?
It's Chesterfield.
That thing is like in the middle of,
Position.
that's crazy.
Um,
I can't believe they didn't buy that guy's, I mean,
Okay, sorry, never mind. I probably
wow.
was
All
holding-
right, well then we're good.
They will have some way for emergency responders to get through supposedly too. So there, but it's just that leg of it, and then once that's done,
And that should be a couple weeks.
And then is
14
that,
days.
I mean, 2 weeks, where they just doing like the approach, I guess, to the roundabout from that side, so to speak?
It's a taper into the roundabouts, what I understood.
That roundabout seems gigantic
It seems
compared to the
really
other ones.
extra.
Is that the same size as our other
You
roundabouts?
drive over it now, is that's what it is? Yeah,
Generally, I believe it is.
heading down the dirt.
it's just weirdly, it's just everything around it so tight. It's tight.
That thing feels huge when you're driving around. Okay, so we're good on that. Anybody have any other questions on any of that stuff? Okay, resurfacing of Clayton, did you already do this one, Rick? Resurfacing of Clayton from Strecker to Black Canyon?
Do you wanna take it? That's
Yeah,
fine.
sure. Thank you, with your permission, Chair.
Sure.
Chair, this is something that was brought up by quite a few residents now, but also has been supported by the mayor. We have gotten time and time again, this is another one of those situations where the city is getting calls and complaints about road conditions for a road that we're not responsible for. So a stretch that is getting consistent attention, but we've really gotten some residents upset about it lately, is the stretch of Clayton Road pretty much from Strecker, if you're heading east, down all the way to about Black Canyon is where they stopped when they did that last project there in front of Lafayette.
Yep.
Um,
It is very bad.
it is not in great shape. And one thing is, and this is reported by residents, but it seems like it was supportive, tonight, the department has provided a kind of an email that was sent to the Department of Transportation, I believe it's in there, requesting them to provide information or figure out when is this programmed? Or you guys got any plans here? And right now they're pretty much saying, hey, be an advocate for it. So that's what we're doing. We wanted to bring it forth from Strecker, on Clayton Road from Strecker to east to Black Canyon. It's in terrible shape. Our city department, I can let our traffic engineer speak on that, but it is in bad shape and it's getting to a point where the road's probably gonna need to be reconstructed if they just don't do anything in the next 5 years. That said, you know, and that obviously increases cost very much. And the residents that have reached out to the county, they have all stated that there's nothing in the plans currently to resurface or touch up that road. They will patch it and do some shoddy work here or there, but it's not gonna actually address the mainframe issue here. And we're looking at all these capital improvement projects that we're doing as a city, but also partnering with different entities. And we're saying, hey, it's finally, we're kind of getting to a point, obviously roads kind of deteriorate over time. That's naturally what they do, but this is kind of the last real squeaky wheel other than, you know, some other spots, but this part of Clayton Road is in really bad shape and an overlay could really do a lot of work and it doesn't seem like too much. So tonight, the department is requesting a motion to bring a resolution to the council, pretty much stating that the council looks at this stretch and is requesting consideration immediately to fund, not with the city funding, but to fund the resurfacing of this stretch of Clayton Road as soon as possible or program it and then provide a report back. This would be distributed to the county council along with their Department of Transportation, their director. So that's something that their director told us is that we need to be an advocate for it and just put a spotlight on it. So then, because it seemed like their transportation director actually might have agreed. So in that case, the idea is let's do it.
Okay. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think I think it's a great idea, but I think it needs to be written up, the fact that that section from Strecker up to the top of the hill is the original Clayton Road before Lafayette High School ever opened up. So everything else, the old Clayton Road back to Valley, I mean, that went through transitions 20-some years ago, but it was 2-lane road. That's all new stuff. So we got new on both ends. And that section of concrete in the middle is probably 25 years old. So I think maybe justifying it that way.
I think it's older than
Yeah.
that.
About 40 years old.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah,
Well, I know when I first moved here, Lafayette wasn't open and the road stopped right up there at West Glen. So that gotta be.
I moved here 25 years ago when it was open. A lot of
Okay.
was there, so.
So at least maybe 35, 40 years old, but I think, didn't Rick, a few years ago, didn't we take the grates out that were across Clayton Road at one point? The
I
drainage,
think you're right. They probably did that work on it, but no, they,
because we kept forcing them because the grates were rusting out and then they came in and put culverts on the two sides, I think 2 places up on here, but I think it'd be really worth how long it's been.
Yeah, well, I mean, that, and then there's a section, would it be by like maybe sundown or something, where the road's actually starting to
Buckle,
buckle.
yeah.
I
I make a motion, we do this.
Quick question, when you were talking to the county, were they talking about getting this funding through East West Gateway, or were they want to do it themselves, or they didn't specify? or-
They did not specify. They said we need to start spearheading it if we want it done, because it was just a very strange response to a very specific question, but right now I can definitely confirm it's not in their immediate plans or even long-term plans.
We had her come out, her spokesperson came out a couple months ago to the council meeting, right? The new
Yeah,
woman.
she was.
I think I brought that part of the road up.
She was a representative with the county executive's office.
Works too.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean,
If they go East West Gateway, it's gonna take 5 years.
Yep. So the hope would be they could probably work it into something sooner, but
they could put it on the same timeline as the crosswalk sign.
Yeah.
That's only 3 years away.
Try not to do it at the same time.
That's it. The gears of the county do move very slow. That said, we've seen before that if we can get enough attention on something, it can pick up steam. But the main thing is the one thing that the city team's noticing is that we keep getting these calls and we have to explain to residents that it's just not our road and
It just happens to be a main arterial road for many, many, many people.
Yes, and that's it. I mean, and it just, quite frankly, it's like, yeah, well, I'll leave it there.
I got, unless you have a specific motion, and I got one that we could.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so I move that the city council formally request immediate interim repairs and accelerated full reconstruction of the Clayton Road corridor between Strecker Road and Black Canyon Court from the St. Louis County Department of Transportation, and authorize the mayor to transmit this resolution to the county executive, county council members representing districts 3 and 7, and the Department of Transportation director, along with documentation of resident complaints and condition assessments.
That's fine. I would say the one thing is if we ask for reconstruction, that's a lot more
They-
expensive. Like, we might want to ask for everything and maybe get a little, but if we ask for reconstruction, that's a lot more expensive than just an overlay, so we might wanna. We can talk about that. Do we want to ask for the whole pie or a piece?
I mean, my thing is, you can, if we ask for all of it,
Yeah.
and they go,
Get
well,
half.
we can resurface it,
Take it, yeah.
okay. I mean, I don't know, Rick, how bad, I mean, I drive that road all the time, it's horrible, so should that, I mean, yes, we could, in theory, you could overlay it and that would probably work for a period of time. But much like what they're doing at Lafayette, I mean, I'm hopeful that these guys finally fix the pothole that had literally been there for 30 years since I went to school there.
Till a real car falls in there.
Yeah, right,
Still.
I mean, how bad is the road, really?
There are some sections when you go down that hill that are approaching the need to rebuild it, in my opinion. Now, definitely the whole road segment is not that bad.
Right,
But some of it is concerning to me.
so maybe we just designate those specific areas. And, you know, or, I mean, I don't know, what do you?
What's the
guys-
traffic count on? Cause I mean, with school coming back in, the traffic count is high.
Real high.
At least 2,000 kids driving to school every day, right?
Chair.
Yes, sir.
Just dawned on me, just listening to you, to be covering the most spaces with the fewest words just by saying, provide all necessary rebuilding and the remainder overlay so that they know that we know that there's two components to answer to, and a simple overlay isn't gonna cut it.
Sure, yeah, we can make that change. That makes sense to you, Rick? I mean, as we know, the county is not real forthcoming
They're
with
not gonna,
much of
nothing but-
anything, so.
we're on record.
Yeah.
As knowing.
That's just something too. I mean, even if they don't do something, especially, they're not gonna do something immediately, but if we can,
On the
start beating
list.
the drum, but then also have something easily to point out when a resident calls us and say, hey, check out this resolution where we've already distributed this, but feel free to show up to the next county council meeting
Yeah,
and
reach out to Councilmember Harder.
yep, and have that directly, just easy, like, hey, make sure to put this over here, contact this person, please, here's his secretary's number and also here's his.
I'm sure there was a good chance he drove down that part of the road when he was at the community college the other day.
He probably did. I mean, that's.
So he's probably aware of it. Okay, well, would anybody care to make that motion? We can make the suggestion Bob offered. Mr.
Yeah.
Marshall?
That's fine.
All right, anybody want to second it? Tracy will second it, so Amy, I'm happy to email it to you as well, but everybody good with what we got going? Okay. All those in favor of boosting this up to the council so we can get word in front of the county on Clayton Road, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any objections? Mr. Vanek will abstain. All right, one abstention, so the motion passes. Okay, that brings us to the small vehicular bridge inspections.
Chair and council members, this next item is presented for your recommendation and your approval. The department is wanting to move forward with the inspection of our small vehicular bridges in the city of Wildwood. We have about 33 of those structures in existence. These are typically small box culvert type structures over creeks. So they're important structures and they are expensive to replace, unfortunately. So we have been on a 5-year inspection rotation, so it's last time we did it was 2020, so we'd like to do that work again this year. And we do have some monies budgeted to do that. And so with the hopes of moving forward, we reached out to GBA, the consulting firm that had done this in 2020 for us. And as well in 2016, I believe they finished the prior one. So we've been working with them on our bridge inspections in the past. They've been doing a good job for us. And so they did put together a proposal to re-inspect those 33 structures for 2025. The cost of their proposal was $30,000. Brendan and I have reviewed it and we are satisfied that it meets our needs. So tonight, we are recommending moving forward with a consultant services agreement with GBA to do the 2025 re-inspections of our small vehicular bridges. The cost of that agreement would not exceed $30,000. So that is the request to you tonight, and I'll wrap up and answer any questions if you have them.
Yes, sir.
Seems like a cheap price, under $1,000 each for 30 of these things. What, two-man crew in a pickup truck with a site level and that's about it, some pictures? Or is there anything a lot more elaborate than that? Price seems pretty reasonable.
Well, I will say the last time we did it, they charged us, I believe, 25,000, so it's gone up a little bit in the 5 years, of course. It's not super complicated. I mean, they primarily rely, and correct me if I misspeak, on a visual examination of the structure. They're looking for deficiencies that need to be corrected or addressed since the last prior inspection. Erosion around the structure, things like that. So yeah, it's a pickup truck, it's a handheld GPS device potentially. It's taking notes and a picture or two of the structure, pulling up the prior inspection report to see if it's still valid, that kind of thing. It's not, it really isn't rocket science. Unless they find something wrong, and then that might entail more work potentially. And we have had that in the past, but the basic inspection process is not real complicated.
I'm really just learning the process of inspection for this item. Are there any that, of these 33, where a senior member of the department could do a drive-by and give it a green dot and say, this one's going 5 years without anybody looking at it, and then pick it up again later? And my goal is not to knock $10,000 off this $30,000 bill, but are there some that are in such good shape that we're gonna be looking squinty at it, why anybody even looked at it? Or do they all deserve an eye on?
Well, I think that's the point of doing it, is to take the time to look at them, because we only do this once every 5 years, so. I don't
wanna
know,
have a
I think there's any in particular.
Only one of the 33 has been replaced within the last 20 years. So I think it would be good to look at them
So
all.
it's doing the inspections every 5 years, keep the record down to just replacing one every 33 years. It's probably a darn.
I think it's a good idea to look at them all.
Investment.
Yeah, I really do.
You want to have that for your record keeping, that you can prove it's been done, right?
We have some weird
Well, I
weather.
mean, if
too.
you have failure of a bridge.
Right.
And at least this, you would get notified that, hey, you need to act on this ASAP. And if
And-
not, then it's kind of like we shouldn't own the structures if we can't keep a close eye on them and keep good records on them too.
Mr. Marshall just said the weather that we've had come through here lately too, tornadoes and severe rains.
Do they like, I mean, do they give us like grades or something on them?
The structural evaluation rating.
So do I imagine if they don't give it to us, if it's gonna be the same guys, can they give us like, this was an A and now it's 10 years later, it's a B minus or whatever it is. So maybe we can roll some of that even into like our erosion stuff where we're seeing where there's maybe problematic flows or something.
Well, they certainly could do that. In fact, if they necessarily would provide that data, they might even provide that for us in the report, frankly.
It said they do the comparison of the old
The
report
previous
with the
one.
new report, so
That's-
they should have it.
Yeah, they should have it. That's one of the beauty of having GBA do the work for us again, because they have their way of
Yeah, they got all.
doing the inspection. So we'll have that consistency from frankly 2016 to 2025.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? Yes, sir.
Make a motion that we approve the GBA bid as discussed in written.
Nice.
Second, the no-brainer.
All right, seconded by Mr. Mabry. All those in favor of approving the bid, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Excellent. All right.
Could we ask them to start it as soon as possible? So we'd have it before we do budgeting?
Yeah, that would be good. How fast do they do something like that usually, Rick?
Well, we can certainly ask, and I suspect that the timeline they quoted us was probably conservative. They said 6 months, I think, for completion. Be glad to make that request, and
I
that's
just
a-
think we should ask to have it before we do budgeting.
Well, is this the same thing like those two Wild Horse bridges? Is this that same kind of, like, the ones that were a couple, like, those were really expensive to fix, if I remember.
Well, yes, I think you're correct in saying that. We have a couple, well, really three structures, I believe, on Wild Horse that fall into this category.
Okay. So, I mean, if one of these, hopefully won't be the case, but if one were to come back as being in bad shape, I mean, that is not an insignificant replacement.
Potentially correct. So we'll be glad to make that request and see if we can get it expedited.
Helps you with the budget.
Yep. All right, that brings us to proposed revisions to city code regarding maintenance responsibilities for property owners adjacent to public right of way.
Chair and council members, this next item was presented originally back, I believe, in April to the committee at that time, to try to get some feedback relative to whether we should move forward. And I think the consensus of the committee at that time was that the desire was to address this issue was positive. And so we're bringing it back to you tonight with some more information and a proposed change or amendment to our code. So this item is kind of twofold. And it relates to our ability to manage the roadside and to clarify the department's responsibilities and the expectations relative to the adjacent property owner. So again, there's kind of two aspects to this item. First, primarily was relative to personal property on the public right of way. And I think we talked about it at the last meeting. We do have very commonly the installation of irrigation systems and even invisible fences on our right of way that have been installed by property owners. This is not done under a permit. Typically, it's done without our knowledge, quite frankly. And then what occurs is there's resulted damage to the irrigation system, sometimes to the invisible fence that is caused by a contractor that's working for us. Typically, either they're grinding the stump on a tree or replanting a tree. The other occasion that occurs is when we do our concrete street replacement project and we're replacing the street and we may be saw cutting out the slab and the saw hits the line, the irrigation line that's laid up right next to the concrete pavement. And so typically required our contractors to repair those items as part of their improvements. And they've done that in the past consistently. And it usually isn't a huge expense, I don't expect, but it does occur pretty routinely when we do tree replanting or concrete street replacement. The hard part is when, the harder part to address becomes when snowplows hit a sprinkler head that might be located just off the back of the curb or off the edge of the road. And or we don't get notified about damage until many months later when the resident turns on the irrigation and they say, oh my gosh, it doesn't work. Or they might have their irrigation company come out and they fix it and they point the finger back at the city. The resident calls us and says, hey, would you pay for my repair? And so we're kind of stuck with how do we best address this situation? What I wanted to point out was we didn't mention this in April, but we actually do have an existing section under our code. And I provided that portion to you. Section 210.490 does essentially prohibit the placement of personal property on the right of way. So in a sense, we've already said to residents, you're not supposed to be doing that, but regardless, it happens and it's happened frequently in the past. So we do have some provisions in the code that allow us to deny those claims when they are made. I guess I'm really looking for a little bit more clarity from the committee in terms of how we should best be addressing these situations as they arise. Should we continue to require our contractors to repair the damage when they occur at no expense to the resident? And when we get these claims submitted to us, and we've got a handful right now, maybe 4, how should we handle them? Should we move forward and compensate the property owner if they can provide us some clarity on the cost and the cost of repair? Or should we just take a simpler approach and deny the claim and say it wasn't supposed to be there to begin with?
Yeah, I do that a few times and run for office. I love you.
Go ahead.
So I guess my question would be is, this has been going on now since we incorporated. I guess the challenge I have is if you're not allowed to put them there, which I understand that, the problem is then everybody can see how much water you're wasting, because now you're watering the sidewalk out to the curb line, and people look at it and say, that's just stupid. So, and I guess the question would be is, on a dollar amount, how much do we do every year in repairing that? Now, the one that I'm familiar with, I talked to them 2 or 3 times this week, is took a tree out, put a new tree in and cut the sprinkler system. It wasn't in front of anybody's house, it was in their common area, but now when they go to activate their sprinkler system, they can't turn it on. But they didn't take the city tree out, they didn't put the new tree in. So that's just one of those examples, but the question would be is, I think there's a way to correct it much bigger, but it's not gonna be cheaper. I mean, I think we could go back and do that. We know anybody who has a sprinkler, and this is just a sprinkler, so it doesn't talk about electric or fences for dogs. We know exactly who has sprinkler systems. The county has that info. If you're gonna make it an ordinance and put it in as our ordinance, then it should go in as an ordinance effective with a 2025 date. And then everybody is notified that if they have a sprinkler system, the city's not responsible for that. Even if it was put in 20-some years ago. I've had 2 houses with sprinkler systems, and yeah, you're right, the snowplow will hit one or something like that. But I don't think we're unique. The question would be is, how do you go back now and say, well, we have an ordinance, we're not gonna do that when it was our contractor? And the snow one, I think, is a little bit more challenging. But if we know that and we do it, I just think there's gotta be a middle ground there, instead of just saying, well, sorry, our contractor is not responsible for when they do the sidewalk or where they do the trees. That's, we're not gonna be responsible for that. So it's my 2 cents.
Mr. Mabry.
Yes, thanks. Mr. Brown, when I read 210-490, I'm going, well, that's good. It looks to me like it has all 3 clauses under A included only in the case of eviction and only in the case of something to do with placement. Doesn't say underground, including personal property and eviction from rental and sidewalk. And then the main title of it, placement of personal property on the public right of way prohibited. The personal property being the irrigation lines. So I just wondered, how did this apply to what the improvement was supposed to end up? If it's only for eviction and it's only for placing something, because people are gonna get amateur lawyers in 5 minutes, say, oh, I didn't place it there, I dug it underneath. And it's hidden, then that's not clean placed on.
Well, I would tend to concur that quoting this segment of the code probably it's not worded directly to address the situation. It could be worded better, I would say. And that could be something that was considered, a more explicitly clear section in the code that addresses this situation. And then again, that could be how we move forward, is trying to provide a more clear, concisely worded section of the code, and maybe it addresses the situation where the damage does occur. Again, I'm bringing it to you because we get these fairly frequently, and we always kind of struggle with what should we be doing when we get the complaint.
I just thought, why in the world is something like a contractor, because these people don't go and dig these lines for the most part themselves. It's much more cost efficient to get a contract come in and lay it all in a day, I think. Do you get a lot of homeowners putting in their own irrigation systems?
Again, they don't come to us for permits when they put them in, but I believe mostly they're done by private companies.
I'm gonna cut
yes.
to the quick. I don't know why in 2025, we don't make it a $10 building permit to install anything, not just lay it on the ground, but install anything on the city's public right of way. On an easement. And I don't know whether it has to cost $500 for that permit because it takes that much clerical and administrative effort at the city, or whether it can just be a $10, but then every contractor who puts these in, who's certified, knows they need a building permit to put an irrigation system that has anything to do with the city's right of way. And all those those pickup truck contractors, little privateers, they don't know. And then the contractor is mad, but then we just say, well, it's been a requirement for a building permit. We're in the 21st century now. Is
They
it
have to get a permit for a sprinkler system from the county.
from the county?
They gotta get a
Okay.
backflow, right?
Yeah,
Then,
a licensed plumber has to do it.
The county gets one.
oh, okay, then it's illegal to put in a system without a county permit.
Yeah,
Isn't the
but in
county
this
telling us-
particular case, they probably aren't even aware.
They're just doing it.
They're just doing it.
Who's they? The
The
homeowner?
contractor,
The contract.
the homeowner saying, I want the sprinkler system in, and they just go ahead and put it in the right of
If it
way.
doesn't require a St. Louis County building permit, then why is the city liable for anything at all, under any guise?
Right, Rick's saying we're not. The problem is you have people who have sprinkler systems and nobody's ever told them that you're gonna be responsible for anything in that easement.
And instead of the illogic of all this, I'd rather have just one mad resident who has learned a lesson. And he gets to go out and get his irrigation line repaired for $200.
That's exactly the
And he
price.
gets to be mad at the contractor for not getting the building permit.
Mr. Marshall's got one right now.
I got one we can talk to tonight. I can give him a call. I had to replace mine. I mean, the snow plow, I don't know that there's any way you're gonna get around that. But when they do a tree replacement, that to me is just a little bit over the line. We pay a contractor, we pay for the tree, and they cut that, and they never said anything to anybody.
Mr. Backer.
Just to understand the scope of what we're talking about, and back to what Mr. Marshall asked like 5 minutes ago, what are we talking about dollar wise? You said there's 4 on the table. Is this a $200 deal we're talking about? Is this a $10,000 deal?
Give it
Like, we're talking a lot of, like, I'm just trying to understand,
You're talking hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars per repair, usually
but how many of them?
300, and I would say.
Less than 10 a year.
It's hard for me to know, like, do you have an idea with the concrete street project?
I'd say with the concrete street replacement project, there's 8 to 10.
8 to 10 for each year,
And then
so,
there's the trees.
$2,500?
There's the trees and then there's the snow plowing.
so maybe 2 to 3 dozen.
What if we looked at it this way? Cause I don't think, I mean, I'm all for putting a policy in place, but I also, like, I didn't like the way they did this when AT&T came in through my neighborhood. But I do think, like, with these tree removals and things like that, we do just sort of like seemingly spring that on people. And I don't know that it would be difficult for us, I don't think it would be difficult for us to get, some kind of a door hanger or something that we put on the house saying, hey, in the next couple of weeks, somebody's
That's
gonna. come take
exactly
this."
what we do with
tree down.
trees. That's exactly what we do. And we do tell them, if you have irrigation, please let us know. And some do, but inevitably, we still have a handful of repairs that slip through for
So
whatever
the ones that
reason.
are like in a common ground, which
Common
that one
ground, that was
is,
the unique
there's no
one.
door to hang anything
Yeah.
on, right? And
That was a unique one.
so.
That's
so-
private property too.
Yeah, but then you
That's-
reach out to the HOA people, that shouldn't be a big deal.
Well, but he's been a trustee, he is in the system, so, but
Yeah.
nobody, apparently, he didn't know that it was even broken until they tried to get it turned on. And it wasn't just us, I understand there was an electrical problem too
Yeah.
with the electric company. So he's not saying it's all our fault, he's just trying to say, help me figure out. Cause our subdivision, we didn't plan on this, we didn't want the tree to start with. I mean, so all of those type of things, which, and you explain to them that you are gonna have the trees because that was your development plat, this is your property. And, oh, okay, well, we didn't know that, but I'm just thinking from a preventative standpoint. But if you were to try to notify everybody, have to send them a letter telling them that this is the law, and then I agree, if everybody knew it, then you can walk away from it. But you need to notify everybody, and then the homeowners association, because you just create a lot of bad will, especially over the years of having them in there.
I mean, I'm all for enforcing. My general philosophy on this is if this is costing us $3,000 a year, I don't know why we care. I mean,
Especially if some of those are truly our contractor did it.
yeah, right. But that's what I mean, like, my sprinkler system got cut a long time ago, so it doesn't work. But I mean, also, I have a guy in my ward that was really upset that we broke a sprinkler head off when we took a tree out and put one in he didn't want. I was like, I don't know what to tell you, man. That's how it works. So, I mean, I'm all for putting policies in place, and if you think this is the best way to go, I just think that this seems like a pretty small problem to me, but I could be wrong.
It's never gonna go away until we do something about it, I think, and even then it won't go away, there'll still be people.
Yeah, I mean, there's still gonna be people mad about it, so even if we fix it, it's like, well, now we lean back on the policy of still making people upset.
Yeah.
I
And that-
had just thought.
Yeah.
that This fell right in the pile of the stuff we're trying to do to improve the broken code enforcement. And this is 100% that. I didn't even register the $3,000 or the 12 times a year. We fix the root cause of an issue. And we do it logically, and we do it consistently, methodically and logically. That's the way city's supposed to run. And then the people are gonna look at it and go, well, they got me 12 ways against yesterday, so maybe it's time for me to adult and wise up and go find out what building permits are required for what. And pay attention to door hangers on doors, whatever else it takes for adulting to occur. Because the more of them that you learn that to, the more of them they're gonna communicate that to their neighbor. They're gonna gripe about it, but now all of a sudden, that neighbor that got an earful from the neighbor is gonna know that, by golly, if I want an irrigation line or a dog fence, I now know that I need a building permit. So I don't wanna get all mad and high blood pressure because my neighbor did, because he didn't feel like paying attention.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
got one more now, new educated resident.
we also have the reality, at least in probably, at least for sure in mine and Ed's wards, but like, I learned this when the fiber came through. I mean, it is a right of way from the street almost to my door. They can do whatever they want, all the way through my neighbor, all the way through my front yard. They don't have to care about any of it.
They come in 20 feet a lot of times.
I believe it's 22 feet into 22 and a half or something, right, Rick? Is that what I figured out?
Yeah, the easement that's beyond the right of way tends to take it almost to your front
Yeah,
door.
it is like to the front step. So any landscaping, anything you put in, they will just come rip it right out. They
It's a
don't
pretty easy
care.
thing for any homeowner to know. If it's outside your front door, you need a building permit for it.
Yeah, but even if you, that's what I'm saying, even if you had a permit, that permit doesn't protect any of those things. The utilities will come in and take it all out. They don't care, and they will, it's unlikely that they will replace it.
That's the broken part.
Yeah, but
If
we
you
can
got a
do it.
building permit, then
I
every
just know
utility
you're gonna get
that comes there needs to
flagged as
respect that
Yeah.
building permit
Yeah.
and forewarn them
What do
that
we-
they're
what
gonna
do
be
we-
doing something.
what's the bottom line here? What do we need?
Well, I apologize. I really wanted to get your feedback in terms of what's the best approach for the
That-
department. Now, we can continue doing what we're doing, which is to require our contractors to repair them where they're aware of the damage.
Yeah.
I think the harder issue is when we get notified after the fact, several months, do we write the resident a check? If
And
they
you can
have it,
verify,
gonna
even
do
if
it.
it's 2 months later, 3 months later, you can verify your contractor put that tree in, right?
Generally, we can, as
Not-
long as they can
wouldn't
find a
know it's broken.
reasonable.
If
Yeah,
the system
verification.
shut off, you put the tree in the fall to get the best growth out of it. They would know till they get ready to activate the system in April that it's broken.
Right.
So in that particular case, they didn't dig the hole, they didn't do it, it was our contractor who did the tree. So
Does every city contractor have to call 811 every time they're gonna do anything, anywhere?
I think so. Maybe, I don't know. They
So
don't-
what they're doing, if they're hand digging, they probably, you think they call.
They're taking the trees out, they're not calling them,
Tree
right?
necessarily, but,
I know for stump grinding, they co-locate.
yeah, okay.
But will those ping sprinkler systems?
No.
Right. I would maybe say, I mean, we can come up with a philosophy on how to do this. I would just say, maybe we figure out how many of these damage claims are we like aware of in advance versus how many are coming through. So if like our contractor, if we have 20 of these a year and 16 of them, our contractor goes, yeah, we definitely popped a line there. And then we have 4 of them that straggle. I think that's maybe a better way to look at it, because I think you're gonna do this through a couple parts of the city. And I think it's maybe even in only a handful of areas that are gonna have these on the other side of the right of way. I think some of these newer neighborhoods that don't have that, I would assume, they all got sprinkler systems when they were built. Right?
I'm not sure I'm following you, talking about, like Main Street crossing.
Yeah, like Main Street or Brightleaf or like wherever, like, at a certain point, when we are, like, if we're platting a new neighborhood, most of those, I think, are probably gonna get their sprinkler systems like as the house is being built. So that's a matter of a planning conversation about not putting them across the.
that's a great idea. Brightleaf's got a bunch of sprinklers. Are they in the wrong places?
Well, so I mean, that's the other nuance issue is that a lot of the HOAs have systems that went in with the subdivision. Well, that's really what happened on Pond Grover Parkway. That was not a private residence, that was installed by a developer and then it was taken over by the HOA probably. So is that a different animal? I don't know.
But they all exist, so we gotta kind of figure out how we wanna. I just think we've gotta be really careful just about dumping it back on them when they. we didn't go to them and ask them about.
I think maybe, I mean, you guys treat this now as like, is it like a case by case thing, or is it just like if we break something, we pay for that?
Someone like case by case, but most of the time it gets paid out once we get our contract.
And I kind of feel like on one hand, it isn't a lot of money over the course of the year. And when you do it for a resident, they sure do appreciate it.
Right.
So it is a small way to ease that concern.
And I would think, I mean, to me, just thinking about the street tree thing, like if you are busting a sprinkler system next to a new tree that's getting put in, that we want to have watered anyways, we probably want to have that sprinkler system working, because it's cheaper than replacing the tree at a certain point.
That is part of the argument, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, to me, I am, I'm more of the opinion that this is, I mean, I'd like to help you out however you guys need to, but this doesn't seem, like, this seems like a thing we're just gonna, it's like hitting a hornet's nest for no reason. I don't like,
I do think though, there's an opportunity for us, and I guess, and I'll make a motion that we do it. When we get to the concrete replacement, to me, the easiest hit there would be, you know, what houses you're gonna do that with. Run the county list on who has sprinkler systems. And then, and I know you say you hang the thing on the door or whatever, but I mean, that really puts a notice out there, because if we know we're gonna tear up in front of that house, and we know that their sprinkler system is on the right-hand side of the house, it shouldn't be that hard for them to be able to ask the person to identify those sprinkler heads, and you're not cutting them. I just don't, I think that's one of those issues where we don't think about how easy it would be for them to do something versus, and then we wouldn't have to take care of it, but just.
and if they don't do something, then it becomes the case by case thing of like, hey, I don't know, I mean, maybe the question is, how much effort do we want you guys to go into to notifying people that this work is happening? Like, I am, like, we had that whole thing with AT&T, they said they put door hangers up everywhere, they did not. And then we've now gone through a different solution to try to get sure that that's happening.
Yeah.
I just think if you're gonna do concrete, they're gonna know.
Yeah.
I
So,
think in a lot of cases, they probably do know, but it may be a situation where they can't avoid the damage.
No, that's true.
No, on the streets replacement project, I think typically that works fine. The contractor has the ability to repair those things on site, and it's not a huge deal. I'm not that concerned about it. The snowplow ones are kind of tough sometimes because we don't know about it till later, and then they send us an invoice. So if you guys want us to pay the invoice, I'm happy to follow through with that. I think we just want some clarification.
We just felt, so I'll be honest, I'll take it on the chin here. It says it in our code, not that they're responsible for it, they shouldn't be doing it, but we were paying these, so it was more of a question of a contradiction. But if we want to continue to ease the pain on these things, I think the staff here would be fine with that. It's not a lot of money each year.
well, it appears to me that every time this happens, the people had no idea we have a code.
Yeah.
So it's not like something that when you buy a house, here's your indentures, and oh, by the way, that's your responsibility. So when you don't know, then you just suddenly get nailed with a bill, and it's like, I didn't do anything, you know?
Right.
What if our policy was to split the costs?
But too.
Yeah.
But if it got ugly, you'd have the right to.
Yeah, I mean, then it's like, hey, there's 50-50 coverage, you know, you're not
Right.
supposed to have, just so you know, maybe the repair is, we're gonna shut this part of your sprinkler system off, so we don't have this problem again. I don't know how that works, but I'm sure it's
So
possible.
just watering our tree.
You don't
Yeah,
have to
unless it's,
mow it.
I mean, you know, the other side of it is like, if it is really watering the tree, which is, that is, I mean, I would balance out how much, I know we've replaced a lot of trees because they weren't properly watered. So I would balance maybe those things out too.
And by the way, you do have to mow that grass 6 inches.
Right.
Don't be screwing around with it.
Well, that's not in our code currently. So that's something we actually, that's kind of the sidebar here. We wanted to add that.
That's part two of this request, yeah.
Yeah. So
I
that was
say
trying to sneak
I say
them.
we pay the repairs and then send them a little rent due bill. How about that?
Could you install it under,
Yeah.
in, within
Yes.
the right of way?
What you got, Mr. Allen?
I was just thinking of the shared cost, 50-50 or something like that. And
We could do that as more like an internal policy. The main thing is I don't wanna, like, if we do 50-50, but then there's also that option, if it gets really ugly,
Right.
we just pay it.
yeah,
That's bad. That's terrible.
Yeah, the hope is that they're not watching this video.
Yeah,
Cause then we do 50-50, but then the staff could know that, you know,
But
there's some discretion,
if,
but
if,
maybe we write
but
50/50.
at least you might be getting some of that money compared to none of it now, right?
Well, what if we just said it's 50-50 and there is no discretion?
Okay.
You know, like, if somebody, because
Set
like,
the policy and
the,
keep
the
it.
policy is 50-50, and if somebody has like a genuine hardship, we're gonna put a process in place where somebody can identify that that is a real thing.
Yeah.
Then that comes out of a different part of the budget, so to speak. But I think you make it a 50-50 policy, and you make it very clear, hey, look, just so you know, you're not supposed, like, it, you know, you didn't put the sprinkler system in, but it's not supposed to be here.
And that takes out the favoritism
Yeah,
issue.
that's reasonable, right? That's
Yeah, I
common
think it is.
sense.
I like 50-50, but
I do like 50/50.
I don't like it at all. I'll vote no. Because I don't think our contractors should go in and tear out somebody's sprinkler system.
Oh, this would still require, like, our contracts try to stipulate that the contractor, if they damage the right of way, they have to put it back, fix it. So typically, if we identify it during the
do,
acceptable timeframe.
do
we
they,
try to go
so in the contract, the contractor has to fix it?
if we can tie it to them, but if it's 4 months later and it
Well, how
was,
would we still, I mean, they did the tree, how would they, we would not know that they did it?
Because the sprinkler was shut off. So
Yeah.
if they do
No,
it.
no, but I'm saying like if the sprinkler, if it worked and then we did a tree and now it, and the resident goes, well, now it doesn't work. I mean,
Their sprinkler repair guy comes out and says, well, this was cut here.
Yeah.
Where this new tree is.
Right.
But nobody ever reported it. But the people who put the tree in obviously didn't know it.
No, when.
But it's been-
how long is the statute of limitations on the,
well, typically, I mean, you could chase them down, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you're reporting this 4 months later, it's gonna take, now you're talking about more staff time.
You shut your system down in October and you don't turn it back on until April or May.
okay,
So that's what's happening, is that
Yeah.
anything, and we plant the trees in October because they're gonna grow better.
how many of these do the contractors pay for versus how many do we pay for?
Rick, what do you think?
Well, on the concrete street project, most of them get addressed by the contractor, I think it's fair to say. We do have a few stragglers with the tree planting. Again, when we do the tree planting, we send postcards, we notify the residents, we're gonna be out there, we ask them to notify us of irrigation, and sometimes in the past, we basically said, if we damage your irrigation, we're not gonna pay for it. We just try to discourage us being on the hook for it, but frankly, if our contractor's out there and they know about it, they typically have the ability to fix the simple stuff, and they'll just do it and be done with it.
So,
So, and I have no problem continuing that, it's just when the invoice comes in 6 months later.
But they don't know they have a problem, Rick. That's all they're saying.
maybe I'm wondering if like,
Right.
you know, I would say then, it should be incumbent on the contractor to know if they have created a level of damage. And so just like we do with some of these like other escrows and things like that, can't we just say to a tree, I mean, tree vendor's making a pretty decent amount of money putting in trees for us, I would assume. Right?
Could I put that back on Omni? Yes, I probably could.
I guess what I'm saying is like, if we know that it's generally like the tree guys in the fall that causes problem, like, if it's a small amount of money, just put it, like, that's just part of their cost of doing business with the contractor, it just sits in this account for the cycle time for however, like, if you're turning your sprinkler on, you know, it's a 1-year thing or whatever we say it should be. I don't know how often sprinklers are supposed to go on.
We ask them the tree, how long we ask them to warranty the tree? Is it 2 years?
1 year, so they very well may be working to address those kind of things and within that time.
So maybe we just.
And the
include
one
that
I'm
in.
talking about though, these are the trustees. They didn't know about the tree. They say they didn't know about it. All they know is the system was working last year when they shut it down.
Yeah.
This year, when they got ready to activate it, their sprinkler company came out and said, hey, that's cut where that new tree was put in. They didn't put the tree in.
Hmm.
So, but they have to pay that in order to get their sprinklers activated to get them running again. So one of the, where they really didn't have any decisions in the process, they're just the ones that are stuck now with paying the bill to get their sprinkler systems up and running for something they had no say on.
So then maybe our policy is, instead of it being a resident thing, it's just an issue that we put in with our contractors to say, hey, that we're gonna, I mean, this, again, this still doesn't sound like very much money to me for anybody. So it's like, if I had a contractor that was coming out to do work on my house and they broke something, my general expectation would be that they fix it. So I don't know why it wouldn't apply in this way. That's just me.
They weren't making the contract with the contractor.
No, I'm saying we made the contract with them, so then our expectation should be, like, we don't pay you to come through and chop up these lines. Like, you're here to fix the trees. So I'm sorry this line is here, but that's also kind of like part of the job. I would think.
Yeah, I agree.
So, okay, so then what we're talking about is we want to put, do you guys, does it make sense? We put a provision into our, with our contractor agreements on the tree?
So now we're holding like a separate amount of money or having.
I don't care if we hold it, but like, we're just saying to them like, hey, there's a 12-month period of time. Like, our expectation is you're gonna report this damage back to us. They seem to do that in most cases. Like, this to me seems like something that is just like the normal course of their
And what
business.
Rick said, they probably repair it right there. If
Yeah, they see it's broken, they repair it,
if
so
they
it
know
doesn't cost them anything, I would assume.
They would prefer to generally address it right when they're
Yeah.
there, you know, and again, the rub is these come back to us many months removed. The contractor they get the bill, it's already been done by another contractor, so they're paying probably more than they would have otherwise if they could have just addressed the situation. And we don't really have a lot of leeway to say, okay, you're required to pay it. Most of our contractors frankly would do it. I'm sure they would, because they're good contractors. And as long as there's no reasonable doubt that they didn't cause the situation, I'm sure they would address it for us.
Yeah, I mean, or maybe the idea is like, the expectation is the contractor is gonna take care of this. In the event, which seems relatively unlikely that they don't, then the city also understands like, there's gonna be a handful of things that we have to take care of, and it's under, as long as it's under your spending threshold, honestly, I don't see what the big deal is, but that's just me. Jason, you got something else you wanna add?
I'm good.
Um. Makes sense?
I don't know if it gets what they're looking for, though. I mean,
I get, they asked what.
Well, I think
they
what I'm
asked what they
hearing is
wanted.
you want us to take
Sounds like
care
you
of
said no.
these one way or the other.
but
Preferably the
don't you
contractor
kind of think
pays the
it is
expense.
our responsibility? I mean, I'm not trying to, I just think it is the responsibility of the city. If your contractor goes in and does something and then it affects that personal property, whether it should have been there or not, your contractor did it. And they didn't know anything about it, then they're stuck. I mean, anybody's been a trustee before, you just don't have an extra money sitting there for something you had no say over or couldn't avoid it.
What would happen if like a mailbox or something got crushed?
And usually the contractor, that's something they see that right then and there. So
But like, that's also in the, I mean, that what I'm saying is, like, that's also in the right of way.
Yep.
And
Well, that's a receptacle for official communicate, like postal service too. It's important to have some kind of receptacle.
well, yeah,
And we,
Mailboxes will get replaced or repaired by our snow contractors as necessary. Those can be kind of challenging.
Well,
items too.
and I know, I mean, the problem is you're shutting the system off, so there's no really way for them to know they hit it. When I've hit one that's charged, I know I hit the sprinkler line, so they are in a different situation there, but I don't know. I think that we probably need to look at the contractors taking care of it, and for those others, make sure that we're doing all the things that we can do. And it sounds like you're doing a good job. I mean, it's not like we're getting hundreds of people, but
So we didn't have a specific motion tied to this one, did we? This was just a lot of discussion.
I mean, there's no motion at the moment because we're a little bit on the fence on what we want to do. It sounds like,
Yeah, I didn't bring you a specific recommendation here. I wanted to get some feedback and.
so this one we can kind of maybe punt and we'll figure this out. We can work on this a little bit more to
Good,
see what we
good.
want to do.
Yep.
But,
would there be a way, I mean, this is more research, but when they do have to use a licensed plumber to get their sprinkler permit from the county, is there not a way for us to have a notice that anybody who's putting one in Wildwood area, that they know that,
You're counting on the county to do that.
well, it's just one more step that, you know,
If you sell a house, you have to have it.
you have to-
every
You
year
have to
you
have
have
the
to have
back,
it,
yep.
you gotta have
So-
it, every year you gotta have it inspected.
Yeah.
So they know you have it, because if you don't do it, they'll start sending you
I mean, if
letters.
they inspect it, they know it doesn't work.
Right.
Even if it has to be inspected if it's not working.
But what I'm saying is like, if you like, you have to get a backflow annually.
They will not send you letters if you don't get one.
No, but if you are
In
doing the
case,
backflow.
yeah.
It's going to indicate that the system doesn't work.
And when you say it doesn't work anymore, then you have to prove it was taken out. So your option there is, you know, I can say it wasn't done, but because it was turned in and you said, well, I don't use it anymore, then you have to prove to them that you've taken the system out, removed it, and then they'll take you off the list and they won't send it to you anymore. But you have to prove that you had a licensed plumber take the system out, is how it's been explained to me over the years.
That's the way it's supposed to work. I just don't know. the
Yeah,
rules.
it is,
That's
yeah.
all I'm
All right,
saying.
well, Rick, I wish I could give you a better answer on this, but I don't think we're gonna get, see, so what else would you like to talk about?
Fine. Part two of this,
There's more.
request tonight, if
Yeah.
we have time to go through it, is a little more specific. And basically, I'm working with our city attorney, John Young. I am proposing a amendment to the code. Now, this second part is a little more general. And it's more relative to the maintenance of the roadside adjacent to a property. And if you read the recommended code amendment, it's basically got three main parts in it. And the first part relative to the request is clarifying the responsibilities or what is not allowed relative to the maintenance of the sidewalk in the right of way if you have a sidewalk abutting your property. And basically what we're saying, I do want to be real clear on this because John Young threw in snow removal, which is probably something that should be considered very thoroughly. But the intent is that property owner or person who controls the property should not put obstructions on the sidewalk, should limit debris on the sidewalk and that sort of thing. But John Young also did put in, should keep the lot clear of snow or ice. So that's an important consideration that we could very easily strike if you'd like us to do that in this recommended amendment to the code. The second part of it, just clarify, is that as a resident, if you have a driveway, that it's your responsibility to keep it in good repair. So effectively, it's not the city's responsibility to maintain your driveway. It's your responsibility as a property owner to maintain that driveway and keep it in good repair, free of irregularities or offsets from the surface thereof, which may render the sidewalk unsafe, or may render it unsafe, the driveway unsafe for use. And the third part really pertains to mowing the roadside. So it does say that as a property owner that you shall keep the lawn or yard on any right of way or easement adjacent to your property that does belong to the city mowed within a height of 6 inches, essentially. So it's putting that in the code to say to the property owner, that it is your responsibility to mow that area adjacent to the roadway, which most people do without questioning it. But it does throw a 6-inch maximum height on that. So when those issues come up, we can address it with the property owner and say, look, it's really ultimately your responsibility to do that. So again, this was put together working with John Young. This is his recommendation. And again, these are areas that I think would help provide some clarity to these issues as we deal with them from time to time. So if you'd like some time to ponder this and we'd like us to bring it back to you next meeting, we could do that. If you want to move forward with it and send it to city council, we certainly can do that.
Snow and ice on the sidewalk, is that just acknowledging it's not the city's responsibility to do it, but it's not saying that the homeowner has to do it?
It's saying they shall.
It's saying this, that says they're supposed to do it.
So
On that
It's-
public sidewalk.
Yeah.
Well,
I
but
mean, like
also
this
it
that we had last
give
year,
you the
I don't have no
give
problem
you the
with
legal
that.
responsibility if somebody slips and falls.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and then there's that, and then also it kind of gets rid of the argument we get from residents that, hey, you missed my apron, come over here and touch this up,
It's
which
not
that
saying
starts
that
adding
it should be
significant
done
costs, so
every
that,
time it snows.
what was that?
It's not saying that the homeowner has to go out there and clear the sidewalk.
Yeah.
That does.
That's what I'm saying.
We're not gonna go out there and necessarily like be looking for it to cite them, but if
I know,
it's
but-
like if they call us to clear it, then we might go out there and visit.
And then
Well, it's your
it's not-
responsibility, it's in
not
the code.
the thing, somebody's out walking their dog and 2 people have their sidewalk shoveled and that just does it,
And
like,
we don't do trails,
We don't.
yeah.
so
We don't do trails or sidewalks. We do
Sure, I
roads.
mean, I get the philosophy of it. It's hard enough to get out of your driveway for some people.
So I'm happy that we strike
We
that
can,
out of the section.
No, I mean, I'm not saying
That's what
necessarily,
you
I'm just
like.
thinking.
might-
like-
it's just, you never enforce it.
No.
You'd end
like,
up.
think about like if someone is elderly and like they can't get out, like, we don't wanna force them to
Right, that's.
get out there and cause damage to themselves potentially. So, yeah,
I mean, I could cost damage to myself.
this is more so for, like, I don't think this is like, it definitely gives us a mechanism, but I also think it's
It must be a
saying that
different way of a different mechanism that you can use that doesn't use this wordage.
We can work on the verbiage there where it's
Yeah.
pretty much saying, hey, the city isn't gonna clear off the
Yeah,
sidewalks.
'cause you're gonna start getting
We're
calls from people like, they didn't shovel the sidewalk.
Yeah, and we don't want that.
So I'm gonna protect Jason on this one. For years, we fought about 6-inch grass in the rural areas. Nobody is gonna meet that requirement. So it used to say residential subdivisions had to be 6 inches. But when you get outside of the suburban or residential development, there's nothing mowing up to the road at 6 inches. Because people will try to do that, but to enforce it. So poor Ron James, he used to argue with that constantly, and Vern Hudson, man, they were fighting constantly. Because Vern wanted 4 inches of grass in Ward 5. And Ron said, look, we're lucky to get people to mow the right of way alongside the roads in 6 and up in 1. So I think maybe that distance maybe be something if it's, and again, I know you have sidewalks, which you don't necessarily have in the rural areas. But the 6-inch thing used to be, you could only do the 6 inches in the subdivisions for the height of the grass, but not in the suburban or the rural areas. Is that
Take it out.
is there any more or not?
Right now, if it's over
Except
6
for
inches,
anybody
we're
else.
citing them for their property. Like if there's someone's grass is over 6 inches, we're typically citing them.
Okay, what is the regular code for grass? It's lower than 6 inches. Is it 6 inches?
6 inches.
That was 10 inches, frankly.
Yeah, I thought it was.
So along our trails, we can go up to 10, right?
I believe that's correct, yeah.
I just think we have to be somewhat consistent.
Yeah.
What we do.
Mr. Mavry, what do you got?
Yes, I had heard recently that if you take one shovel stroke at your sidewalk, you're responsible for every lawsuit that comes after that. If you don't touch your sidewalk, you're not liable for anything. I don't know where I heard it, but that struck me when I read this, and that portion of, to me, was worded perfectly. City is not responsible to maintain your sidewalks, your driveways, or your driveway aprons, or the sidewalk across your driveways. If it has to be that redundant and that brain dead, then that's exactly the way we should word it, to show anyone who comes back at us that, no, we had even your most trite and childish condition already covered, because we knew you were coming. The next feature is that we would change that wording from what it was about shall cut the grass in the street side of the curb side. I thought of it much more streamlined and much more encompassing that the owner, property owner shall be responsible for 100% of the maintenance, repair, and upkeep of all of their property, private property. This includes any easements, any appurtenances, improvements, or anything's in the easements. That's it. And then they have nothing to come back and say, well, you didn't say the word grass. No, that's an appurtenance or an improvement or a portion of your private property, which says it includes all easements. So it's just a way of very cleanly accommodating everything and not weakening the city's position because it forgot a word.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm thinking we need to look at what the code is for the grass.
10 inches.
So then we can't, like, it's gotta be consistent.
We will admit that our city attorney did draft that second component up for us, so we'll correct that at 10 to make it consistent.
10 inches is really high, in my opinion, but.
That is pretty high.
That's pretty hot.
That's real high.
That's
The
almost
thing
a
that's-
ruler.
Yeah.
The thing that's neat about 10 inches is you can't quibble about it after it's 10 inches because everyone knows 6 inches is civil. So when you get up to egregiously ridiculous 10
You
inches,
just have to mail it.
you're more than overdue to cut it to something.
Gotta bring the goats in.
The goats.
I'm sorry.
It's for all.
All right, so I would say maybe, I guess we could do a motion on this, but I feel like we need to do a little bit of work on some of this thing, and I'm just gonna suggest, I know that John's had his hands really full lately, but might not be a bad idea to check the new regulations off the existing ones, just to make, if we're gonna make changes, it should be a blanket change. So if we're gonna go we want this to be 6, then the code should be 6 across the board, because I don't know how we tell people you can have 10-inch grass here, but you gotta have 6-inch grass there. I also doubt we're gonna enforce any of that. And I will say the driveway thing, why? I mean, I agree, people should have nice driveways, but I don't know how we are going to figure that out or enforce that.
I think the driveway thing is more so about snow. We're saying that we're not gonna clear your driveway.
Yeah, but isn't there a thing about like keeping it in, like,
Good shape. Well, that's more so too. So think about it like this. That's trying to cover a sidewalk that is going in a dense subdivision that's got the tree lawns, right? So you
Yeah.
have that sidewalk, then you have the aprons that stretch past the sidewalk. Technically, the sidewalk is part of their driveway. And this would pretty much say, hey, if it's that segment that's in front of your driveway or connected to your driveway, if that gets out of whack and someone trips and falls, that's on you, not the city, because you're responsible for maintaining it. Even though when we're doing, when we're shaving down sidewalks.
I'm gonna say, don't we shave them down? And I
We
mean,
do.
thought we were taking care of that.
We do.
We do, and we do maintain the area through the approach for a driveway. So that would be the city's. It's just everything else is the residents'
so
responsibility.
I would say this, cause I noticed that somebody in my neighborhood got their driveway done and they did the driveway and then they did half of the slabs of the sidewalks off of the driveway, which I thought was odd, because either don't do the slabs or do the slabs. They went halfway. But I'm also thinking like, we had those issues with the driveways buckling when they were boring underneath them and stuff.
Yeah.
So, if somebody's driveway is in disrepair, which we ran into a lot, then how do we explain that process to them? I'm all for people having nice driveways because the driveways look bad, but I mean, there are people that have gravel driveways. I just think that, I don't know how we define, I don't know how we define or enforce it.
Possibly you can do it by like different zoning designations, like certain types of planned residential.
Maybe we wanna just get a couple more specifics on this, because, all of these things seem like the kind of issues that we've run into a lot where, not to like split the city up, but like there are things that are just factually different in one part of the city versus the other. And so having a blanket policy like this, like 10-inch, if people had 10-inch grass in my neighborhood, people would light their heads on fire. And so the fact that we can't get a code enforcement, like, it's no wonder we don't get very many grass.
Well, and I will say that a little bit different than the old stuff. This does say if you have a sidewalk. So from a rural standpoint, if it's just, you're down to the road or whatever, you don't have a sidewalk, so that really wouldn't apply to it. It's just before we were trying to say that you need to cut the right of way along the road before we as a city were even doing that. And there's hundreds of miles of area where people were being told that you're gonna have to cut that.
Well, and also, don't we have a subdivision that isn't cutting their grass there that we take that on? Did I imagine that?
We have a few exceptions here and there, yes, and that's partly why it'd be nice to have some code to say, look, it's not our responsibility. Doesn't mean we can't choose to do it, but ultimately it falls back on the property owners being their responsibility.
So we can say, that's not our job. That is your job to maintain it. But I think it needs to be 10.
So this would be my question. How do you communicate, let's say we did that, how do you communicate it to those specific suburban people?
When they say that it's your job, city,
Yeah.
we tell them, no, it's not. And then we have this argument because we don't have any specific language in the code that we can fall back on.
I mean, usually these are when the new subdivisions turned over to the city, they take the streets. We kind of went through this with Main Street Crossing.
Right. So we currently cut that, right?
We currently cut, so we made a deal, we cut up to the sidewalks, but they take care of the medians. Like, we're not gonna just keep cutting the median.
I think you have rules for regular subdivisions and then the rest of Wildwood,
Yeah.
like I think what you're kind of alluding to.
The intent with this was more for traditional subdivisions and not the rural roads.
It's not
necessarily,
rural.
But
Yeah.
Well,
that
okay.
could be clarified.
Maybe we do this then where we will say that, I think it's a fine thing to say, yes, sir.
Is there a way to put an acreage exception there? Meaning, obviously, if someone has 5, 10, 15, 20 acres, they're functioning in a way different
Yeah,
kind of world than what we're talking about here. So could that be a way to accommodate kind of what you guys were saying and still have some teeth?
we can do that.
we, in the past, it was residential versus rural.
So it's it kind
Bigger
of
or
gives you,
larger, yeah.
and I think 5 acres is good because 3 is probably too.
There's 3 acre, there's 3.
But there's a bunch of them, right? And those are still residential, still have sidewalks. Fewer when you get to 5.
And there are very few, yeah, that would work. I think, I mean, I would say too, if you guys are, if this is more designed to fix that issue with that specific subdivision,
Yeah,
let's fix that. We don't, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know how many other, how many other places are not cutting the right of way.
Well, we have a lot of places we cut the right of way that we choose to do it, a lot, and I think that's partly why I feel like it should be in here. Because it's not clear, you know, who's responsible, why is one subdivision HOA doing it here?
Yeah.
But we're doing there.
Yeah, I mean, my subdivision does it, I'm super happy to let you guys take it over.
And
Everybody
that's what
else
we're
did.
trying to avoid is that slippery slope where everybody just starts piling it on because that's what this should be doing is that, hey, it is.
So if we, but then again, with those subdivisions, those people have landscaping contracts that are in place for sometimes multiple years. So how do we communicate to them, oh, by the way, we are not cutting your right of way starting tomorrow?
Or you
What?
contact them, we say it's against the law, no, I mean, not against the
So
law.
note that the intent here is to back out of any existing arrangements or agreements that we're doing. It's really in the future. Or if somebody changes, the subdivision comes and says, hey, we don't want to mow this, city, you mow it. No, we're not gonna take it over. That's your responsibility. It's not intended to go to all these HOAs and suddenly tell them, hey, you gotta take this over from us. It's not my intent whatsoever.
How did the city end up taking over some of these?
Well, I imagine a lot of them were from the get-go, frankly. They date back to when we took over the streets. There were arrangements or things occurred at that point in time. But it's hard to really know. There's a lot of unique
It
things.
obviously wouldn't be anything that's new or new subdivisions in the last 20 years. You wouldn't be taking over anybody that way, would you?
Well, again, we just went through this with Main Street Crossing, to a degree, right leaf across the street, with mowing in those areas and
Just
having
technically
this
it-
in the code would help us to say, look, this isn't really the city's responsibility. We shouldn't be doing this, but we don't. have
There's a
that
lot of
right now.
nuances here that, you know, people like me are just completely unaware of and that you've dealt with for years. And I think probably the most appropriate thing would be for you guys to come up with some ideas that would be consistent and fair and perhaps grandfather in people who already have, but then make allowances for what happens in the future. But for me to come up with a plan for you guys, I mean, I'm at a loss how to help you. And I think going forward, it's probably, like I said, best for you guys to come up with a plan and then explain it to us. And then we can vote on it personally.
Yeah, so maybe what we want to do is if you guys can do it, which I imagine you can. We need to, I would like to see some
You don't
kind of
know.
like an audit report that tells us where are we in gray areas on wherever those are, and to the best of our ability, why are we in it? And then we can try to unravel what's going on, because I'm of the opinion, you know, we probably shouldn't be cutting the right of way of any subdivision.
But I think part of it is, once you have that list, then to lay it out and say, okay, this year, we're, you know, a third, so they can budget.
Yeah.
Themselves to take it over and we can minimize our costs associated with doing it. Would make those people a lot happier, so that there's no free ride, but you didn't just say.
I mean, like, I know for mine, we do 3 to 5 year contracts and our contracts are up next year. So if I was one of these people, then I would really like to know, like, well, we can fix it now or we
I
can
have-
fix it in 5 years, because that's the ability I've got.
Again, it wasn't my intent to renege on any existing agreements.
No, and all I'm saying is, we'll never get out of it unless we come up with a plan down the road to transition out of some old things that we're stuck with.
Just because we've been doing it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do either.
Yeah, so I think if you guys can just come up with, like, let us know where we're talking about, that would be very helpful. And if it is more helpful because of that sort of contractual things, we could do that in closed session.
5 or 4 or 2 or.
Because I'm sure they're all on
7 and 8.
Per se,
All right, so that was a lot. I think, unless you got anything else hidden in here, Rick, I know we wanted we were hoping for some things there. We'll get working on it, but, yes, sir.
Are we going to discuss anything more as far as the next steps for the road, street closings or that stuff? I mean, we kind of left it out there at the council meeting that it was gonna go back and the staff was gonna come up with a recommendation on Turnberry and these others, and we got the one over
The
here.
obstructions in the right of way?
Yeah.
That's supposed to go back to council and ordinance.
Should come back up.
Monday night.
Gate and
Or
Yeah,
whatever. next
it,
week.
well,
barriers.
well, it's obstructions and there's technically it would be a policy to look at each one by case. That said, is that an official question? Can I answer? The department has heard some feedback. The Turnberry residents are not thrilled about the idea of the policy, so.
Somebody's
That's great.
spreading the word, huh?
Yeah, we
Somebody
just might
started
have.
spreading the word.
Yeah.
That shouldn't surprise me.
Could you do this for me, or Mr. Mabry, if you don't mind? If we could return word to the residents of Turnberry, we'd love for them to fix the ugly part of their road that they're responsible for. Since we're going to do an assessment, and part of the assessment is, does this look bad or not?
Well, and my only question was, we're not gonna see it before it's just gonna come to the full council.
That was the idea of it from the.
So I guess the challenge would be full council, be cautious of what happens. I mean,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's not always the best way to work out the stuff.
Yeah.
And Mr. I'm sorry.
So we have to get the gate thing passed before we can move to Turnberry.
Or the gate, the gate got denied, but this is more so a policy for criticizing and reviewing obstructions in the right of way. Once
Okay.
that's passed, that would
So-
give direction to look and review.
So what's going on with Ashley Grove then?
So that should come back to we had the first reading, right, on the
Yeah,
gate?
there's 2 readings on
And
it,
was
but
both-
there's an interesting point
postponed it.
though.
That we postponed it
Yeah. you
till we come up
postponed-
with an
remember you
answer
wanted
on
to-
the gate.
Yeah, that said, there's they govern the
Check.
gate, it's now Ballards, and the Ballards are technically located on private property. So that's an interesting loophole for what this is a heads up.
There's a really interesting article in the
That's-
Eureka
that's
paper.
stupid. Who's
For
doing this?
Legends Highway, both the police and fire departments said they lose 15 minutes with the gates on the end of it. They're taking them out.
Here's what I would say. I've had plenty of conversations. There is zero chance that this gate thing is not
Pass.
passing. Like, the second that thing hits, I don't even think there's gonna be a conversation about it. So that needs to come. I will be happy to have a conversation with the mayor on that. That needs to come at the next meeting. The other thing that we can work on, which we already have a framework for and a study of most of them, is the framework for how do we assess some of these things, and basically going back through the notes. I mean, genuinely, I think we're talking about like 3 to 5 places, right, Rick? I mean, we have like Hidden Valley that's kind of a different thing. And, there's private ones, but when you're talking about public obstructions, gates and things,
Turnberry.
it's Turnberry and there's one on Joe's Way.
So Joe's Way is a fire gate.
Those are,
I
the
know.
obstructions not on the public right of way.
But the idea is all of these things, so if we put a prohibition on the gates and the obstructions on roads, that's step 1, right? That happens. Then we go and assess what's going on. So, the fire gate at Joe's Way, I'm familiar with. It appears to be functional and in good shape. So it would not score highly on like, the idea would be if we're gonna take this out, at some point, it's gonna cost us $20,000, but currently there's no reason to do that.
Yeah, there's no road.
And there's no
Yeah,
road.
That gate's on private property though, too, the Joe's Way one.
Yeah.
It's a secondary entrance. It's not a
Right.
primary entrance.
So the idea is to evenly assess everything. And then as an example, there's the one in the back of Wild Horse subdivision. And I think I said in the last meeting, that looks fine. If someone were to drive a car through it, and then the question is, are we fixing this or taking it out? Once the prohibition goes in place and we have our scoring mechanism, then it's like, yeah, we're not spending $40,000, whatever it is, to fix the gate. We don't have any more,
Cause we don't, it's not our gate to start with.
whatever.
Yeah.
So when we're, but you know, in this instance, you know, like we've had in other places, Turnberry is a very unique situation. And, you know, I was, Mr. Vanek and I were on the Board of Public Safety when we talked about it, and the fire department and police were,
I was there when it was closed
Yeah.
the first time. It should never have been.
so, I mean,
And the roads have been changed since that too.
so I'll talk to the mayor, we'll get this, I mean, we gotta get that stuff moving forward.
I just don't want it to lay out there and nobody does
it needs to
anything
get done.
because we gotta
Can we,
move 'em.
can you confirm for me that the status of this gate thing that I heard several versions of right now? The first reading was to deny installation of the gate, first reading.
There was no
Last
readings of, these were all work session items. There was a motion to draft legislation implementing the policy. And then there was also a separate motion, second, and a separate consideration under the work session to review the proposals for the gate. The gate got denied in work session.
And that's, was not a motion and seconded and voted on to deny the installation of the gate?
It was a motion to deny accepting the bid,
Yeah.
because
The bid had been
Bob,
gone.
there was a first reading on Ashley Grove. And then the second one got postponed last meeting.
Because the situation had changed from the Board of Public Safety. So the two kind of tie together that way. And that was my reason for postponing it, is it's silly for us to go ahead and have them do it and then turn around and say, oh, well, now we have to take it out when the fire department and the police don't want it in there anyway. So
Yeah,
if we
so,
can just.
so the policy is, it's supposed to work where at our next meeting, the policy comes forward, no more gates or obstructions. That should then answer, although there's maybe some flexibility because it's on private property or whatever. But there's no more gates and obstructions, and we do have a framework in place, unless you guys want to alter it, to score what these
We've got
existing
some
gates
reference
are.
language, we ran it to the city attorneys.
Well,
It'll,
it's gotta be public streets too.
Yeah, it's public.
So I
that's
mean,
what-
the
that's your
secondary
public.
fire exits in Monarch are not
you can't.
public streets.
Yeah, so that's fine. So, I mean, at the only public street, the only place that this applies is one place. So for the benefit of the residents of Turnberry and the residents of Ward 2 and the residents of Ward 4 and everybody else that has had this conversation for almost 25 years, we should, it's insane to me that this is still going.
Got Brightleaf.
Brightleaf would have been like there, yeah, I mean, that's when it should be assessed. So if if somebody goes through there and knocks down all those things, if I would assume if this thing passes, then we just don't put more things back in. I mean, that's.
That's always been.
Those are technically on common ground in an easement.
Yeah, but they're blocking the public street both ways, Birch Forest or Birch.
Yeah, but that road, I mean, that road was a court, that was the other, that was the other part. So we were talking through
But
like,
they're not
the other side of this
They're not
is
on public right of
they
way.
should either be courts or through streets, not these kind of like T-turn, weird,
Yeah.
whatever. Because, you know, we
The
spent,
options are so much more expensive than just connecting the streets.
I mean, Rick, do you remember how much we spent on that Birch Forest turnaround? That was like hundreds of thousands of
Oh,
dollars.
twice.
Yeah.
It's about 100 and $250, I think was the original bid, so 100
But if we would have done it the first time, the developer would have had to pay for it.
No, we could have had the developer connect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of us eating it. I mean, that's my problem.
Yeah, so the idea would be moving forward, any of these new subdivisions, that is just not a conversation. Like they either connect or they don't. This isn't a like, oh, maybe they do.
Typically, the idea is to connect streets, so in town center especially, we propose to them and we say, the idea is to connect streets for use, but then groups, small pockets of residents come out and say, we don't want the street to connect, and then the
Doesn't
planning and
matter.
zoning commission derives off and says, well, let's do this.
That's why we took
thing.
it to Board of Public Safety. I mean, I think we're the best place we've ever been.
Yeah.
And it's just getting to be a bigger issue. That's why I said that with Eureka Legends, they're saying, well, you know, that's costing 15 minutes in response time. They're taking those gates down and opening it up again. So, and the people will go crazy because it was a private road. So.
Yeah.
But I think that my only concern, I know we left it postponed. And when you only meet once a month, if we don't get something going, so.
It's coming.
Good.
That's gonna, I I will have a conversation with the mayor and implore him that that needs to happen. soon now.
So we're probably gonna see Turnberry residents Monday, then probably, right?
Very possibly.
Yeah.
And I hope that they come out. I think it'll be great. I'd love for them to come out. That's how this whole thing works.
Seem pretty motivated.
Huh?
They seem pretty motivated.
Cool.
Do they?
Great.
Makes for a longer meeting.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
No, all right, excellent. So we've got some more items down the way, but we don't have to talk about those this time. I guess we're to nothing miscellaneous. Adjournment. Anybody care to make an emotion? Mr. Marshall
So
makes the
moved.
motion. Mr. Backer seconds it. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you.